Hey guys, tonight we step into a medieval kitchen, and the year is 1325. The castle of a minor lord looms above the damp fields, its stones blackened with age, its halls thick with the smell of wood smoke and meat fat. You duck beneath a low archway, torchlight flickering across rough walls, and push into a chamber where the air feels alive with heat. Sparks burst from the hearth, steam coils upward, and voices call over each other in a frantic rhythm. Knives flash, iron clangs, and somewhere above the rafters drip with condensation. This is not the quiet sanctuary of a modern kitchen. It is a battlefield of boiling pots, cracking logs, barking orders, and singed eyebrows. And yes, you probably won't survive this. Not with your delicate 21st century lungs choking on soot in under 3 minutes. Before we plunge deeper, do me a favor. If you're into this strange world of food, fire, and forgotten flavors, hit that subscribe button right now. It's the only seasoning I can add without risking another rat falling in the soup. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to know if you're listening from a midnight couch in California, a rainy morning in Manchester, or somewhere in Karachi while your chai cools. Because tonight the kitchen opens its doors, and I promise by the time we leave, you'll smell of ash, onions, and fear. This is the secrets of a medieval kitchen. Let's get cooking. You step into the kitchen itself, and the first thing that hits you is the sheer volume of noise. The clang of metal against metal rings out as knives meet chopping blocks and ladles scrape the bottoms of cauldrons. Voices of men and women overlap. Commands shouted, complaints muttered, jokes slipped in under breath. Even the fire itself contributes, hissing as fat drips into the flames, snapping like an impatient dog. Your eyes sting instantly. The air is a murky soup of wood smoke, grease, and steam. Ventilation is almost non-existent. The only escape for the fumes is a hole in the roof that may as well be a polite suggestion. In winter, the smoke lingers heavy and stubborn, smothering every breath. By now, the servants barely notice. They cough, they wipe their eyes, and they carry on. The floor is beaten earth, darkened by centuries of spills, grease, and trampled ash. It squelches in some corners where water has seeped down. In others, it hardens to cracked patches like dried leather. Rats scurry boldly across your path, pausing only long enough to judge whether you look like someone who drops crumbs. The cats of the castle prowl here for exactly that reason. Half tamed, half feral, tolerated, because they earn their keep with claws. The walls are rough stone, but they are alive with shadows. Iron hooks protrude, holding cured meats, garlic braids, bunches of dried herbs. Some of those herbs are rosemary and sage, their fragrance fighting valiantly against the omnipresent reek of smoke. The rest are local weeds you probably couldn't identify, unless of course you once Googled medieval weeds that won't kill you. The heart of the room, unmistakably, is the great hearth. It stretches across nearly an entire wall, wide enough for 2 adults to lie down inside if anyone dared. Logs thicker than your thigh smoulder and roar, occasionally prodded by a boy whose job description is, "Don't let the fire die, Ev." Flames leap high, licking spits of turning meat, while cauldrons dangle from chains, swaying slightly with every ladle dipped into them. You approach one of those cauldrons, and the smell is overwhelming. Cabbage boiled until it surrenders, barley swelling with water, scraps of bacon bobbing to the surface. The cook swats you away with a wooden spoon as though you're another fly. That spoon is big enough to double as a weapon. Honestly, it probably has. Medieval kitchens are the perfect breeding ground for culinary murder mysteries. At the long table, 2 scullions work with brutal efficiency. One hacks through a pile of onions, so quickly tears stream down his face like a broken fountain. The other plucks feathers from chickens, scattering them across the floor where they cling to greasy boots. Both boys look underfed, which makes sense. They're lowest in the pecking order, and no one saves them the good cuts. The head cook, however, is unmistakable. She is broad-shouldered, commanding, and armed with a cleaver that has seen more action than most knights' swords. Her voice booms above the clatter, issuing orders without pause. More salt in the stew, keep the spit turning, and for God's sake, don't let the bread burn again. Around her waist hangs a ring of keys, symbol of authority. She controls the pantry, the storage rooms, the flow of ingredients, Without her, the kitchen would collapse into chaos. The smells shift as you move. One corner reeks of fish, freshly gutted and waiting for the pan. Another offers the sweet comfort of honey cakes, baking in a small oven. Across the room, someone pours ale into jugs, and the yeasty tang cuts through the heaviness of smoke. Your stomach clenches. Whether from hunger or nausea, you can't quite tell. A dog lies curled beneath one table, its ears twitching every time a bone hits the floor. Don't be fooled. It isn't anyone's pet. Dogs here are workers, sometimes even tied to wheels that power rotating spits. If you thought your treadmill was boring, imagine walking in circles 4 hours just so some nobleman can have evenly roasted pork. The rhythm of the place is hypnotic. Chop, stir, shout, scrape, cough, repeat. Every task fits into a greater cycle. The Lord's breakfast, the servant's midday meal, the preparation for dinner. The kitchen never truly sleeps. Not while the hearth burns. Even at night, embers are banked carefully under ash, ready to flare again at dawn. On the far side, barrels of ale rest in shadow, their wooden staves slick with condensation. The smell is sharp, almost sour. Next to them, sacks of grain tower, tied shut against pests. The kitchen is both battlefield and treasury, holding the wealth of the estate in edible form. A lost sack of flour is no small thing. It could mean hunger in winter. Overhead, rafters sag under the weight of hanging game. Rabbits, pheasants, sometimes even swan if the Lord is feeling extravagant. Blood drips in slow, steady patterns, caught in wooden bowls on the ground. The sight is grotesque, but nobody flinches. This is simply what food looks like before the neat packaging of your supermarket. You wonder if you'd still buy chicken nuggets if they came with feathers attached. The heat is suffocating, sweat beads on your skin, trickling down your neck, soaking into your clothes. The cooks don't bother wiping their brows anymore. They've accepted the constant dampness as part of the job. In winter, the warmth is a blessing. In summer, it feels like a slow, smoky death sentence. The kitchen is both life-giver and tormentor. A bell rings from the hall above. Dinner approaches. Instantly, the pace quickens. Spit boys lean into their work. Bakers rush to pull loaves, and serving staff polish platters until they shine faintly in the dim light. Every movement now has urgency. Delay the meal, and the wrath of a noble lord might fall squarely on your head. No one wants to be the reason for cold venison stew. Amid the frenzy, jokes still surface. A boy whispers about a rat that fell into yesterday's soup, and asks if anyone noticed. A girl cackles as she sprinkles extra pepper into the pottage, claiming it will make the priest sneeze so hard he sees visions of saints. Even in misery, humor bubbles, perhaps because without it, the weight of endless labor would crush them. You catch sight of the serving hatch, a wooden opening leading into the great hall. From here, platters will pass upward, transformed from sweat and smoke into feasts displayed with pomp. But the guests who eat never see the grease, the burns, the rats. For them, food is a performance. For those here, it is blood, toil, and blistered hands. A scullion dumps a bucket of dirty water out the back door, and the splash soaks your boots. He doesn't even apologize. Behind him, pigs snuffle eagerly, rooting through discarded scraps. Nothing goes to waste, not because of some eco-conscious principle, but because survival demands it. Waste too much, and winter reminds you with hunger. The cook wipes her knife on her apron, leaving another streak to join dozens already staining the cloth. She surveys the kitchen like a general inspecting her troops. Good, she mutters. This will please the Lord. Around her, the fire roars. The pots bubble, the air thickens, and you realize this kitchen is not merely a room. It is the beating heart of the castle, without which no banquet, no feast, no daily bread could exist. And yet, as overwhelming as it is, you sense its secrets have only begun to reveal themselves. Beyond the hearth lie bakehouses, dairies, cellars, and gardens. Each has its own rhythms, its own smells, its own perils. For now, you breathe in the smoky air, feel the sting of heat on your skin, and accept that you stand at the threshold of a world few outsiders ever glimpse. The living, burning soul of a medieval kitchen. The hearth pulls you forward like a magnet. It is less a fireplace than a stage, where flames rise high, licking the soot-blackened stones, and sparks leap like mad insects. The sheer size of it stuns you. Wide enough to swallow an ox whole, deep enough that several cauldrons swing from heavy iron chains. You lean closer and feel your eyebrows crisp at the edges. This is the medieval equivalent of central heating, central stove and central disaster, all in one. Ash piles beneath it like dunes, sifted grey and soft at the surface, glowing red underneath. Servants shovel it constantly, dumping it into barrels or scattering it outside, careful not to lose a live ember. Ash here isn't wasted. It finds second lives in lye soap and preserving eggs, even in the desperate scrubbing of greasy pans. Nothing in this kitchen is useless, not even the dirt beneath the fire. Wood feeds the beast endlessly. Great logs are dragged in, stacked like corpses awaiting burial. They vanish hour by hour into flame, and in winter, when every hall of the castle demands warmth, the demand is relentless. Keeping the hearth alive is a job that never ends. One boy crouches near, sweat dripping, his sole task to poke and prod with a long iron peel. The poor lad is nicknamed the fire's shadow because he practically lives inside it. Above, spits stretch like long arms, each bristling with meat. Ducks, rabbits, whole legs of mutton rotate slowly, fat dripping into pans below with hissing applause. That fat, carefully collected, becomes dripping precious fuel for frying or flavouring. You think about your bottle of cooking oil at home, and then realise here, every drop counts. Miss one, and you've just thrown away tomorrow's frying pan lubricant. Not every spit turns by hand. Against one wall, a dog treads endlessly inside a wheel, its paws padding in weary rhythm. The contraption looks like an oversized hamster cage, but the creature within isn't amused. Its task, walk, or the roast will burn. Some lords boast of whole lines of spit dogs, bred for their endurance. If you're wondering whether the dogs enjoyed their career path, let's just say none ever volunteered twice. Closer to the flames, cauldrons swing like pendulums. One holds pottage, a vague, ever-changing stew that absorbs yesterday's leftovers and today's scraps. Another simmers with broth rich in marrow bones, sending up a meaty perfume. A third strangely contains water alone, for cleaning knives or blanching vegetables. At times the cook orders all three changed at once, and chaos explodes as chains clank, lids rattle and steam blinds anyone unlucky enough to lean over. The noise of the hearth is its own orchestra. Logs crack with pistol shot sounds, grease spits in angry sparks, chains creak as meat turns. The boy at the fire coughs constantly, his throat dry, his lungs half ruined before his 15th birthday. In the din you almost miss the constant roar of flames, like an impatient lion reminding everyone who is master here. The smell is another battlefield. Rich roast pork fights with cabbage, onions and smoke. A faint sweetness rises from honey dripping into a pan, only to be smothered by the pungent whiff of charred fat. Your nose cannot decide whether to salivate or retreat. To work in this kitchen is to exist in a permanent haze of temptation and nausea. Tools line the hearth like weapons in an armory. Iron hooks, spits, shovels and tongs lean ready for battle. Each weighs more than a modern frying pan. A scullion struggles to lift a cauldron lid, his face red, his body trembling. One slip, and the contents could scald a limb beyond repair. Injuries here are not uncommon. Burned hands, blistered arms, the occasional permanent limp. No one writes ballads about kitchen martyrs, but they exist. Bread toasts near the fire too, balanced on long prongs or skewered on rods. The crust blackens at the edges, crisp and smoky, ready to be grated into crumbs for sauces. You didn't think of bread as an ingredient before, but here it transforms, thickened soups, lined trenchers, or crumbled into pies. The fire doesn't just cook meals. It produces the building blocks of half the dishes on the Lord's table. In the evening rush, the hearth becomes a storm. Multiple spits turn, each demanding attention. Cooks bark at spit boys, faster, slower, stop, start again. Cauldrons bubble angrily, their contents thickening into supper. Pans sizzle as someone fries cakes in fat. It is a choreography of heat, smoke and panic, and every misstep costs dearly. A roast overcooked is a humiliation, a stew burned, a catastrophe. Sometimes the hearth is used for more than food. Herbs are tossed on coals to freshen the air, though frankly, the attempt is laughable against the tide of grease. Pots of resin simmer, releasing medicinal fumes for the Lord's lungs. In winter, servants warm their stiff fingers at the flames before returning to chop vegetables. The hearth is healer, torturer, and tyrant all at once. Accidents, of course, are inevitable. A ladle slips, scalding water splashes, a log rolls, sparks burst onto clothing, a woman's sleeve catches fire. She beats it out, muttering curses that would peel paint. Few scream anymore. It's simply part of life. The cook's scarred arms bear witness, long pink streaks from past burns, each one a memory written in flesh. The hierarchy of who touches the hearth is strict. Scullions fetch wood and water, boys turn spits. Only the head cook or her trusted assistants dare to lean in and taste. It's a sacred border, almost a battlefield trench. Cross it without permission, and you risk both a slap and unemployment. This flame feeds the Lord, and by extension his power. It is not a toy. On festival days the hearth transforms further. Whole oxen roast, chained between iron posts. The smell drifts across the courtyard, drawing peasants like moths. Outside, mouths water. Inside, sweat pours. Dozens labour in shifts to keep the beast turning, to baste it with ale or vinegar, to ensure that when the moment arrives, the meat is succulent enough to impress a hall of nobles. Compared to the grandeur of feasts, today's work is smaller, but no less crucial. The fire cooks the daily bread, boils the morning gruel, prepares stews for servants and masters alike. It is not glamorous. It is survival. Each flame is a coin of life, purchased with wood and labour. Without it, every cupboard full of food is useless. By night the hearth winds down. Coals glow red beneath the ash, carefully covered so that dawn will not require a full relighting. A single log might smoulder all night, guarded like a treasure. Imagine your smoke alarm going off every morning, because someone had to start fire from scratch. That's how vital it is to preserve embers. As you step back from the roaring blaze, eyes watering, lungs stinging, you realize this hearth is more than a kitchen tool. It is the pulse of the household. Every meal, every scrap of warmth, every whiff of smoke ties back to it. Around its flames, hierarchies are enforced, labours endured, and meals created that echo in the great hall above. It is both servant and master. And you, standing here, have only just begun to feel its heat. Iron gleams everywhere you turn, blackened by smoke, heavy in the hand, and often too hot to touch without a cloth. The kitchen is an armoury of pots, pans, and tools, each built to endure fire and punishment. Unlike the neat rows of stainless steel in your modern cupboard, these pieces are mismatched survivors, some new, some battered by decades of heat, each one a little scarred, warped, and smoky, and yet every one has a role to play, and every one is indispensable. The largest are the cauldrons, round-bellied, thick-walled, suspended from hooks or chains. They rule the cooking space almost as much as the hearth itself. Some are so vast that a grown man could curl up inside, though if he tried, he'd probably come out, boiled instead of roasted. Into these cauldrons go grains, vegetables, hunks of meat, and gallons of water. They are the workhorses of the kitchen, endlessly simmering pottages that serve as the staple of daily meals. Their iron bellies soak in heat slowly, then hold it stubbornly, making sure nothing cools before the cook decides it should. Smaller pots jostle for position beside them, some resting on trivet stands over coals, others shoved directly into the fire, handles stretched long, so a servant can pull them without losing a hand to the flames. The surfaces are rough with soot, polished only where constant use has worn them smooth. Lids are rare, more often cloths cover pots to keep ashes from falling in. And if ash still finds its way in, well, congratulations, you've just seasoned your stew the medieval way. Pans are flatter, but no less weighty. Iron skillets with stubby handles lie ready for frying cakes in fat or searing cuts of meat. They hiss and spit the moment they touch the coals, throwing up smoke that makes the air sting even worse. Each one could double as a weapon if necessary, which is probably why nobody ever insults the cook directly to her face. A pan swung in anger leaves an impression no bard will sing about, but everyone in the scullery remembers. Spits stretch long and slender, designed to pierce whole carcasses. Rabbits, birds and hams hang skewered along their length. The iron bars must be kept turning, always, or else the meat blackens on one side and stays raw on the other. To manage this, servants take turns or, as you saw earlier, a weary dog powers a wheel. At feasts, spits big enough for a pig or even an ox dominate the hearth, a sight that impresses guests and terrifies spit boys who know one slip could mean disaster. Knives are everywhere, their blades gleaming dully in the firelight. They vary in size from broad cleavers to delicate paring knives, though delicate here still means capable of hacking through a bone. Handles are wood or horn, worn smooth by sweat and grease. A cook sharpens them constantly, striking steel against stone in a rhythm that sounds like a threat. One careless moment and fingers join onions on the chopping board. It's no accident that the kitchen keeps its own supply of bandages. Ladles and spoons take on monstrous proportions. Some are carved from wood, others forged in iron, their bowls deep enough to scoop pints at a time. The head cook wields one like a scepter, tasting, stirring, and occasionally smacking a lazy servant on the shoulder. Stirring is relentless. Leave a pottage unstirred for even a moment, and the bottom scorches, filling the air with bitter smoke. Once scorched, no amount of herbs can save it. Stirring, therefore, is a matter of survival, not preference. Mortars and pestles, heavy in stone, stand in corners waiting for herbs and spices. They grind garlic, crush mustard seed, pound peppercorns and reduce bread into powder for thickening sauces. Each thump echoes like a drum beat in the noisy room, blending with chopping and hammering into a kind of chaotic music. The pestle, slick with oil, slips if handled carelessly, and more than one apprentice has learned the hard way that you do not crush your own thumb. Other tools lie stranger to modern eyes. There are flesh hooks, long-pronged iron rods used to haul meat from boiling cauldrons. There are pie molds, carved from wood, shaping pastry into elaborate forms. There are skimmers, long-handled spoons with holes for lifting scum from broths. Even sieves made from horsehair stretched across frames, strain liquids into surprising clarity. It is a world of objects invented for a single purpose, carried out with stubborn dedication. Wooden trenchers, though meant for serving, are stacked here too. Carved shallow, round or square, they double as plates. Nobles get trenchers made from fine bread, baked dense enough to absorb juices, while common folk use the wooden kind. Either way, they end the meal soft, soggy, and destined for the pigs, or, if luck allows, the beggars at the gate. The wear on these tools is telling. Pots dented from careless drops, pans warped by uneven fire, knives nicked where they struck bone instead of wood. Nothing here is pristine. Perfection is not expected. Function matters, not appearance. If a cauldron leaks, a patch of lead mends it. If a handle breaks, rope ties it back. Tools survive as long as they can, until even patchwork fails. Then they are melted down, reforged, and born again in some new form. Recycling, medieval style, to clean them is its own ordeal. Water must be hauled in heavy buckets, heated again over fire, and mixed with sand or ash to scour away grease. No neat soap bubbles here, no running taps. Elbow grease is the only detergent, and the smell of burnt-on fat never truly disappears. Knives are wiped on aprons, spoons scraped with cloths, pans beaten with handfuls of straw. It is exhausting, endless, and barely keeps the pests at bay. Every tool has its guardian. The head cook keeps keys to the pantry, but the kitchen steward keeps tally of pots and knives. Lose a ladle, and questions will be asked. Tools are not just possessions, they are investments. An iron cauldron costs dearly, more than many peasants see in a year. To break one is almost a crime. To steal one, outright treason, which means every servant eyes them carefully, counting and recounting after each meal. The soundscape of tools is important as their shape. Cleavers strike bones with sharp cracks. Ladles scrape pots with hollow echoes. Knives chop rhythmically, punctuated by curses when they slip. The hiss of water hitting hot iron adds its note, a vicious steam scream that makes even the bravest jump. Over it all rises the steady heartbeat of the fire. Together, the noises form the daily song of the kitchen. What strikes you most is the weight of everything. Lift a pot, and your arms ache. Swing a pan, and your wrist protests. Nothing is light. Nothing designed for ease. Servants are expected to be strong, enduring, capable of lifting burdens daily without question. A modern cook would call in an ergonomic specialist. Here you just grit your teeth and carry on. The smell of iron itself lingers. Metallic, hot, faintly bloody, where knives cut fresh meat. Combined with the ever-present smoke, it coats the air in a film you can almost taste. You wipe your lips and wonder if you've swallowed more soot than soup. The servants do not notice. They live in this haze day after day, lungs blackened long before their time. Even tools tell a story of status. The Lord's table expects refinement, carved moulds for jellies, knives, sharp enough to slice swan breast thin. The servants' meals, by contrast, rely on rough spoons, battered pots, and whatever scraps the noble cooking leaves behind. The divide is stark, and it plays out even in the handles of knives, ivory or bone for the high, plain wood for the low. Standing among these instruments, you sense their quiet power. They may seem lifeless objects, but in the right hands they feed armies, impress nobles, and keep households alive through winter. A single pot might see thousands of meals before it cracks. A knife might carve bread for one generation, then butcher hogs for the next. They are the silent companions of history, their clangs and scrapes echoing long after the meals are forgotten. And as you turn from the rack of knives, past the steaming cauldrons and the squealing wheel dog, you realize this. In a medieval kitchen, the tools are more than objects. They are survival. Without them, the hearth is just a pile of fire. With them, smoke and flame become dinner, feast or famine. They are the bridge between raw ingredients and nourishment, between chaos and order. And in this smoky, noisy world, they might just be the only things keeping the entire castle from going hungry. The smell of baking bread drifts even before you reach the bakehouse. It seeps under doors, curls through corridors, and clings to your hair as you approach. For many, it is the most comforting scent in the world, promising sustenance, warmth, and stability. For medieval people, bread is not just food, it is the backbone of survival, the one constant in meals, whether noble or poor. Without bread, the kitchen would falter, and the household would know hunger. The bakehouse itself is a separate building, often placed just far enough from the main kitchen to keep the danger of fire at bay. Its oven is not a neat little appliance, but a looming dome-shaped furnace built of stone and clay. It dominates the room like a silent beast, its blackened mouth wide enough to swallow trays whole. A fire burns inside for hours before baking begins, heating the walls until they glow faintly. When the flames die down, embers are raked aside, and the hot stone retains enough heat to bake batch after batch. Bread comes in many forms here, and each tells a story of rank. Nobles eat fine white loaves made from sifted wheat flour, light, soft, and expensive. The poor chew through coarse brown bread, baked from rye, barley, or whatever grains the harvest allows. Sometimes peasants' bread is mixed with beans, oats, or even ground acorns to stretch the supply. To modern tastes, the texture might feel more brick than loaf, but to them it means survival through winter. The process begins at dawn. Flour, water, and salt are mixed in great troughs, stirred with thick wooden paddles. Yeast is fickle, sometimes caught from the air, sometimes saved from previous doughs. Servants knead with aching arms, folding and pressing until the mass is smooth. There are no neat machines to do the work, just muscle, sweat, and time. Kneading becomes almost a rhythm, a chant of thuds and sighs as hands push, fold, and stretch the dough. Once shaped into loaves, the dough rests, covered in cloth, while the oven reaches its full heat. The head baker tests the temperature not with a thermometer, but with experience. Toss in a pinch of flour and see how fast it browns, or reach in and judge by the sting on your skin. Too hot, and the bread will scorch. Too cool, and it will remain pale and dense. Precision here is measured by scars and instinct. When ready, the loaves slide into the oven on long wooden peels. They line up in neat rows, each with its own space, and the oven mouth is sealed with a heavy door or packed with clay to trap heat. Inside, the silence is deceptive. Loaves rise, crusts harden, and the scent thickens into something nearly intoxicating. Minutes stretch long as the baker waits, ears tuned for the faintest crackle that signals readiness. At last the loaves emerge, golden for the lucky, darker for the careless. Steam bursts as they are lifted free, filling the air with warmth and promise. Each one is tapped on the bottom. A hollow sound means it is baked through. They call on racks or bare boards, though many never rest long before being sliced, trenched, or devoured. In noble houses, the finest bread is reserved for the Lord's table, while coarser loaves make their way to servants or villagers waiting hopefully by the door. Bread is more than daily fare. It is currency. Rent can be paid in loaves, alms given at church doors, and treaties sealed with symbolic breaking of bread. Monasteries distribute it to the poor as a holy duty. In times of scarcity, bread riots erupt, entire villages driven to desperation when ovens stand empty. Control of the bakehouse means control of the stomach, and therefore control of the people. The trenchers, served at feasts, are bread in another form, thick slices baked dense enough to act as plates. Hot meats, gravies, and sauces soak into their surface, softening them as the meal progresses. At the end, trenchers might be tossed to the poor at the gates, or given to the dogs. Nothing is wasted, because bread, no matter how soggy, is still food. Yet, bread can also betray. In wet years, rye grows mouldy, producing ergot that poisons whole villages. Convulsions, hallucinations, and death follow, whispered of as curses or witchcraft. Few know the culprit lies hidden in the very loaves they depend on. Bread sustains life, but it can just as easily twist it into nightmare. Within castles, the baker holds a curious position. He is not the grand master of feasts. That honour belongs to the cook, but his work underpins the table. Without bread, every dish feels incomplete. His oven is his throne, and though his clothes are dusted perpetually with flour, his word carries weight. He decides which grain becomes fine loaf and which is destined for fodder, balancing fairness with the demands of his lord. Inside the bakehouse, tools crowd the room. Peels lean against walls, their handles charred from constant use. Sacks of grain pile in corners, guarded like treasure. Sieves hang from beams, their horsehair stretched tight to sift impurities from flour. Each item is worn smooth, marked by years of practice. Flour dust coats everything, walls, floor, faces, giving the servants the ghostly look of bakers from beyond the grave. Children sometimes sneak in for scraps, drawn by the smell that wafts like a promise of heaven. A crust, dropped on the ground, is still a feast for a hungry child. Bakers chase them out, waving peels like swords, but they know that when famine bites, even those scraps might vanish. Bread is too precious to squander, too sacred to leave to rats and children alike. Rituals cling to bread as firmly as flour to fingers. Crosses are cut into loaves before baking, partly to let steam escape, partly to bless the food. Some households keep a small piece of last week's loaf believed to bring luck when added to new dough. Even crumbs on the floor are treated with respect. To tread on them is bad fortune, to waste them is near sin. Bread is sustenance, but also symbol, echoing in prayers about daily provision. In feasts, bread becomes art. Loaves are sculpted into doves, crowns, even castles, displayed proudly before being eaten. Colours are added with saffron or parsley, giving pale loaves a golden or greenish hue. For nobles, bread is not just food, it is decoration, wealth flaunted in every shape and shade. For peasants, the same act would be laughable, a luxury they cannot afford. Still, the essence of bread remains the same. Whether coarse brown lump or fine white roll, it fills the stomach and stills the ache of hunger. In fields, peasants dream of it. In castles, nobles demand it. And in the bakehouse, day after day, hands knead and ovens roar to keep the cycle alive. As you leave the bakehouse, flour clings to your boots, and the warmth of the oven lingers in your skin. The scent of loaves follows you like a shadow, soft and insistent. You realize that for all its variety, bread is the simplest truth of medieval life. Without it, no table stands complete, no feast shines, no village survives. In every crust lies the story of survival, faith and power, and the bakehouse, smoky and flour-streaked, holds that story within its walls. The smell of roasting meat is thick and heavy, clinging to every stone and every cloak that passes near the hearth. It rolls out of the kitchen and drifts into the courtyard, where even the dogs sit alert, noses raised to the wind, hoping for scraps. The process of roasting meat is both a performance and a punishment, demanding constant labor, endless attention, and the patience of saints, or more accurately, the exhaustion of servants who have no choice. At the heart of it lies the spit, a long iron rod, sharp at one end, balanced on brackets over the open fire. Meat is threaded onto it, sometimes in pieces, sometimes whole. A bird might be trussed with twine and skewered through the breast. A leg of venison is stabbed clean through the bone. In the most extravagant cases, an entire pig or even a young ox is mounted, legs tied close to the body so it rotate evenly. Nothing about this process is delicate. It is brutal, practical, and absolutely necessary for feeding the appetite of a castle. The spit does not turn itself. At the far end, the servant crouches, his hands gripping a handle that juts from the rod. His sole task, keep the meat rotating slowly, steadily, without pause. If he turns too quickly, the outside burns before the inside cooks. Too slowly, and fat drips into the fire unevenly, leaving black streaks across the surface. The rhythm must be constant, hour after hour. Imagine the dullest workout routine you've ever done, and then multiply it by hunger, heat, and the fear of punishment if you get it wrong. In larger kitchens, the job is sometimes given to a wheel dog, pacing endlessly inside a wooden contraption connected by gears. The dog walks, the spit turns, the meat cooks. The arrangement looks clever, but the dogs are miserable, tongues lolling, paws raw from friction. Servants still have to watch the process, correcting the speed when the animal falters. A noble guest might marvel at the novelty of dog-powered roasting, but for the animal and the boy tending it, the task is far from amusing. As the meat cooks, the smell grows unbearable in its richness. Fat sizzles and hisses as it drips, flaring into sparks when it strikes the coals. The fire roars with approval, crackling beneath its prize. Cooks baste constantly, using long brushes made of bundled twigs or feathers, dipped into pans that catch the dripping fat. Each sweep across the surface glazes the meat, turning it golden, shiny and mouth-watering. Seasonings, salt, vinegar, wine, herbs are brushed on too, each layer adding depth. The result is not just food but spectacle, a glowing, sizzling centerpiece meant to impress. Not all meat is noble venison or pork. Chickens, ducks, geese, rabbits, anything that can be caught or raised finds its way to the spit. Birds are plucked roughly, sometimes singed over the fire to remove stubborn feathers, then skewered in lines of 3 or 4. Their thin bodies cook faster, spinning like grotesque ornaments, heads and wings jerking with every turn. The cook keeps an eye out, pulling them off at just the right moment, before the flesh tightens into leather. Occasionally, creativity takes hold. A peacock, prized for its feathers, is roasted and then redressed after cooking. The skin and plumage carefully replaced so the bird appears untouched, only to be carved at table. Swans, too, are roasted whole, their long necks coiled unnaturally, their beaks stuffed with spices. The taste is said to be stringy and tough, but the sight of such a bird at a feast silences any complaint. Nobles eat status as much as they eat meat. The servants around the spit suffer more than anyone. The heat is relentless, pouring off the fire in waves that sting the eyes and soak clothing in sweat. Hands grow blistered from the spit's iron handle. Shoulders ache from hours of repetition. Some boys faint, overcome by smoke and fatigue, and are dragged outside to recover before being sent back in. The meat must keep turning. It does not care if the turner collapses. Timing is everything. The cook watches with hawk eyes, slicing small cuts into the flesh to test doneness, sniffing for the change in aroma that signals readiness. Too early, and the inside remains bloody. Too late, and the whole roast dries into a ruin that even the dogs might reject. This is not just food preparation. It is a high-stakes gamble played against fire, fat, and time. Around the spits, the kitchen floor grows slick. Fat splashes into pans, overflows, and spatters across the ground. Servants slip, curse, and right themselves before disaster strikes. Yet the same grease is precious, collected in earthen pots, used later for frying breads or flavouring porridge. Waste nothing, that is the rule. What drips from tonight's roast becomes tomorrow's cooking fuel. The smell of smoke seeps into everything nearby. Cloaks, hair, even the bread baking in the next room absorb it. Nobles in their halls above may enjoy a roast swan, brought to table in all its splendour, but they rarely think of the stink clinging to the boy who turned it. That boy will sleep reeking of smoke and fat, his lungs filled with soot, his clothes stiff with grease. If there's romance in roasting, it exists only for the eater, never the worker. There is, too, a danger in distraction. A servant who loses focus might allow one side to char, or worse, let the spit slip entirely. A half-cooked roast is shameful. A roast dropped into the fire is unforgivable. Tales circulate of cooks dismissed for such blunders, their reputations ruined, their futures bleak. In a world where reputation and craft mean survival, no one risks such disgrace lightly. Still, moments of humour sneak in. Servants joke about carving off slices when no one looks, though the truth is that such theft, if caught, would earn a whipping. Sometimes the boys at the spit dare each other to swap sides, seeing who can stand closest to the flames without flinching. The bravest, or perhaps the most foolish, last longer, their eyebrows singed into crooked lines. It is grim work, but laughter is the only seasoning they can claim for themselves. The meats destined for noble tables rarely go straight from spit to plate. Once cooked, they are carved, chopped, or arranged into elaborate dishes. Roasted venison might be shredded and set into pies. Pork could be glazed with honey and spices. Even the simplest bird becomes part of a display, surrounded by sauces, herbs, or moulded jellies. Roasting provides the heart of the dish, but the artistry that follows transforms it into spectacle. For the lower servants, though, scraps matter most. Bones stripped of their best flesh still hold gristle and fat. Ends of roasts, too tough or charred for the Lord's table, end up in pottages for the staff. A gnawed bone to a servant might mean a rare treat of meat on a winter's night. The gulf between feast and survival is measured in leftovers. On feast days, the roasting can last all day. Spits packed from one end of the hearth to the other. The kitchen becomes a furnace of smoke and frenzy. Dozens of servants working in rhythm, basting, turning, seasoning, pulling and serving. The heat rises until the air feels molten, and the roar of voices matches the roar of fire. It is chaos, yet somehow, by evening, platters emerge laden with roasted splendour, carried aloft like trophies into the great hall. By the time the fire dies low and the spits stand empty, the servants are near collapse. Their arms ache, their faces are blackened, and the smell of meat still clings. But for a moment, they can rest, knowing they fed the household, that the Lord was pleased, that the spectacle succeeded. Tomorrow, it begins again. But tonight, the spits cool in silence. As you step back from the hearth, the memory of roasting clings to you, the glow of fire, the hiss of fat, the endless turning of iron. You realize that in the medieval kitchen, roasting is not just cooking. It is ritual, punishment, and pride, all in one. The spits hold more than meat. They hold the weight of labour, the cost of extravagance, and the hunger of everyone who waits beyond the kitchen walls. Fish arrives at the kitchen in endless forms, fresh from river or sea, salted hard as stone, smoked until blackened or pickled in barrels. To a medieval household, fish is not a luxury, but a necessity, demanded by the church as part of its calendar. Fasting days, which occur with numbing regularity, forbid meat from four-legged animals, leaving fish to fill the void. More than 100 days a year, kitchens across Europe reek of scales, brine, and wet nets, because salvation apparently tastes like cod. The storage of fish is a world of craft and endurance. Fresh catches spoil quickly, so fishermen and kitchen staff race against time. Salted fish, though, can last months. stiff and pale, stacked in layers within wooden barrels. The salt burns cracks into hands that pack and repack them, leaving skin raw, but without it, entire villages would starve in winter. Herring especially becomes a backbone of medieval diets, shipped in vast quantities, traded like treasure. A sack of pepper might fetch gasps, but a barrel of salted herring can feed a household through Lent. Smoked fish lines rafters, blackened and shriveled but safe. It is not beautiful food, nor tender, but it fills the stomach and keeps hunger at bay. Salmon, eel, and mackerel hang high, safe from rats, but not from the smoke that thickens the air with every passing hour. Servants climb up ladders to fetch them down, brushing ash from their surfaces. The smell clings to hair and skin long after the fish is gone, a reminder that smoke preserves more than flesh. It marks people too. Pickling adds another method. Fish is submerged in brine or vinegar, sometimes flavored with herbs. Barrels of pickled eels sit in corners of storerooms, lids sealed tight. They are slippery, strange, and not beloved by all. But in times of scarcity, they are miracles. Vinegar stings noses as the barrels are opened, but within lie months of stored meals ready to serve when fields yield little else. On the hearth, fresh fish cooks with surprising speed. Smaller ones are fried whole in pans, their bodies curling as heat tightens them. Larger ones are stuffed with herbs and roasted near the flames. Some are boiled in cauldrons with leeks, onions, and parsley, a fish pottage that feeds dozens at once. Heads and bones are not discarded but boiled longer for broth, thickened with bread, turned into sauce. Every piece is used, for waste is unforgivable in a kitchen where winter always looms. Monks play a special role in this story. Cloistered communities, bound by stricter fasting rules, demand fish constantly. Their ponds, carefully constructed and maintained, teem with carp, tench, and pike. These are not wild catches, but cultivated supplies, farmed centuries before modern aquaculture. Monastic kitchens hum with the sound of nets dragged from ponds, of fish flopping in baskets, of brothers blessing the catch before carrying it to the pan. Fish in monasteries is both food and spiritual discipline, sustaining the body while curbing indulgence. Nobles treat fish differently, of course. For them, fish is not just sustenance but spectacle. Great dishes appear at feasts, whole salmon laid on platters, skin shining, mouths stuffed with lemons or herbs. Pike might be served in elaborate sauces, spiced with imported ingredients that transform a simple catch into a mark of wealth. Even sturgeon, a rarity, finds its way to noble tables, its flesh tender, its roe prized. Guests gasp, not just at the taste, but at the extravagance of such a dish. The ordinary folk receive simpler meals. Their fish is boiled plain, fried in fat if fortune smiles, or gnawed cold from a salted hunk. It is food for survival, stripped of grandeur, but still deeply valued. A fisherman's wife might boil eels in a battered pot, serving them with coarse bread. A peasant child might chew dried herring, teeth tugging at its leathery flesh. These meals lack ceremony, but they keep the hunger back, and that is ceremony enough. The smell of fish pervades the kitchen on fasting days. Salt stings the air, scales litter the floor, knives flash silver as they gut and clean. Cats gather boldly, tails twitching, waiting for a careless slip. Dogs linger too, though they prefer bones with more meat. The clamour grows as servants hurry to prepare dozens of dishes at once, ensuring the Lord does not feel deprived on days when meat is forbidden. If the church insists on abstinence, the kitchen insists on abundance to soften the blow. Preparation is messy. Guts slide onto boards, blood mixes with water, and the floor grows slick underfoot. Servants work quickly, their fingers nimble from repetition, slicing, scaling, and cleaning without pause. The waste is not wasted, of course. Guts feed animals or enrich gardens. Heads become broth. Skins are dried for odd uses. Even in fish, the principle of nothing wasted holds fast. Sauces transform many of these dishes. Mustard, vinegar, parsley, and garlic are blended into mixtures that mask the stronger odors of preserved fish. Without them, some meals would be nearly inedible. Salted cod, softened in water for days, still carries a tang that makes noses wrinkle. Only a sharp sauce redeems it. turning necessity into something close to pleasure. Feast days often turn fish into showpieces. A whole pike might be reassembled after cooking, sewn back into its skin for display. Two different species might even be stitched together for effect. A medieval version of culinary theatre. Guests gasp at the sight, not realizing the trick, and applaud the cook's miracle. The kitchen laughs in private, proud of its craft and deception. Markets hume with fish trade, especially near coasts. Barrels line streets. Merchants shout prices, and the smell is unmistakable. Inland towns rely heavily on salted and dried stock. Carried by carts over long distances, fishmongers become essential links in the chain of survival. Their work as vital as millers or bakers. To them, fish is money, and each glistening body means another day's earnings. At times, scarcity breeds tension. A poor harvest of herring, a frozen river, or a spoiled barrel can throw entire communities into crisis. Households scramble for alternatives, stretching grain or slaughtering animals they would rather have kept. Fasts continue regardless of circumstance, because the church does not bend its rules for hunger. In such years, resentment simmers as bitter as vinegar, whispered in kitchens, though rarely allowed. Children of servants learn early to clean and prepare fish. Tiny fingers pluck out bones, wash scales, and arrange platters. It is training for life in service, a skill passed down generation to generation. Some grumble, others joke, but all understand its importance. To fail at preparing fish properly is to risk displeasure at table, and displeasure flows downhill swiftly. The presence of fish marks identity as much as survival. To eat fine trout signals nobility, to chew dried herring signals poverty. Yet both sit side by side on fasting days, bound by the same religious rules, divided only by preparation and presentation. Fish, more than most foods, collapses social distance while still underscoring it. A strange paradox of medieval life. As night falls on a fasting day, the kitchen quiets, but the smell lingers. Bowls of fish broth are carried to servants, platters of spiced salmon to the hall. The hearth smoulders low, embers glowing beneath blackened cauldrons. Cats lick their whiskers, children carry scraps outside, and barrels are sealed again for tomorrow. Fish has been both duty and burden, yet it sustains, as it always does, year after year. Walking away from the hearth, you realize how deeply the rhythms of medieval life are tied to rivers, seas, and ponds. The calendar of faith is written not only in prayers, but in the smell of salt, the scrape of scales, the taste of vinegar and smoke. Fish fills the empty spaces where meat cannot go, becoming a bridge between survival and salvation. Its presence in the medieval kitchen is not optional. It is commandment, commerce, and custom, salted into the very bones of the household. The garden behind the kitchen may look humble, but it is every bit as important as the hearth. Rows of cabbages and leeks bend under morning dew, their leaves shining pale green in the mist. Paths of trodden dirt lead between patches of beans, onions, and turnips. Wooden fences creak in the wind, keeping out wandering pigs that would happily uproot the entire crop in minutes. Here, among the herbs and vegetables, the real backbone of medieval meals is cultivated. Cabbage grows thick and plentiful, forming the base of endless stews. Its smell, sharp and sulphurous, drifts through the kitchen day after day until no one remarks on it. Leeks, too, thrive, their long white stalks prized for both soups and medicinal brews. Onions, dug from the soil and braided into ropes, hang under eaves to dry, ready to flavor nearly every dish that leaves the hearth. Without these vegetables, the stews would be watery and bland, but with them, even a pot of scraps tastes hearty. Herbs give the garden its fragrance. Rosemary bushes stand near the gate, their needles ready for roasts. Sage, mint, and thyme cluster in beds, each clipped carefully by servants who know their worth. Parsley spreads quickly, brightening sauces and garnishes. To the untrained eye, they are weeds. To the cook, they are miracles, capable of disguising the sour tang of old meat, or lifting the taste of salted fish. A pinch here, a handful there, and suddenly survival food resembles a dish worthy of the Lord's table. Garlic and chives thrive in small corners, strong enough to perfume the entire patch when crushed. The head cook swears by garlic, throwing cloves into potages, sauces, and even medicinal mixtures. Its bite is unmistakable, sharp enough to keep more than vampires away. Some nobles consider it vulgar, a peasant's flavour, but in kitchens it reigns without apology. Beyond vegetables, fruit trees line the edge of the garden, apples, pears, and plums, gnarled but dependable. In autumn, their branches sag heavy with fruit, gathered quickly before frost arrives. Stored carefully in cellars, they provide sweetness through the bleak months. Some become pies or sauces, others are dried or stewed. Even their cores and peels are not wasted, fed to pigs or boiled into rough cider. The rhythm of the garden stretches into the rhythm of the kitchen, each season feeding the next. In summer, the garden bursts with abundance. Beans climb poles, peas swell in pods, lettuces unfurl like green fans. Servants harvest daily, carrying baskets brimming with colour back to the kitchen. The cook sorts them swiftly, deciding which go to the lord, which to the servants, which to be dried for storage. Nothing is random. Every carrot and onion follows an order that sustains the household. Autumn brings roots, turnips, parsnips, carrots dug from the earth and stored in cellars packed with straw. Their sweetness deepens with the cold, becoming treasures for winter stews. Children dig them out with small spades, hands red and muddy, laughing despite the labour. These roots, humble and overlooked, are the true survival food, filling bellies long after gardens fade beneath snow. Winter narrows the garden's offerings, but even then dried herbs and stored roots carry on. Bundles of sage and thyme hang in the kitchen rafters, their fragrance faint but enduring. Leeks and onions hold well in cool storage, feeding stews that steam in cauldrons. Apples shrivel, but still add tartness to pies. The garden's voice may quiet, but it never disappears entirely. Spring renews it all. Shoots push through soil, bright and tender. Nettles, often cursed as weeds, are picked young for soups, rich in iron and vitamins long before anyone knew the word. Sorrel adds lemony tang to potages. Even dandelions find their way into salads. The servants bend low, gathering what grows, knowing each handful delays hunger. The garden, modest though it seems, becomes the household's salvation every spring. Medicinal herbs grow here too, part of the blurred line between kitchen and apothecary. Chamomile for calming, fennel for digestion, horehound for coughs. The cook may not be a healer, but she knows which leaves to brew into teas, which roots to mash into poultices. In a world where illness lurks everywhere, the kitchen garden doubles as pharmacy, its remedies passed down in whispered tradition. Children learn the plants almost as soon as they can walk. A mistake can be fatal, confusing wild garlic with poisonous lily, or parsley with hemlock. Lessons are sharp. Pick this, not that. Smell first. If you're unsure, don't touch. Generations of survival depend on such knowledge. Forget, and the price is sickness, even death. The garden is no playground. It is classroom, storehouse, and test all in one. Weeds constantly challenge the order. Thistles creep between rows. Nettles sting careless hands. Creeping vines choke tender plants. Servants spend hours on their knees, tugging, hoeing, and muttering curses. Their battle never ends, for the weeds always return, stubborn as hunger itself. Yet even weeds can serve nettles as food, thistles as fodder, dandelions as medicine. In the medieval world, even intruders earn their place. The smells of the garden differ wildly from the kitchen, where the hearth smothers air with smoke. The garden bursts with freshness. Crushed mint sharpens the senses, rosemary soothes, sage lingers earthy and strong. After hours by the fire, stepping into the garden feels like breathing clean air for the first time. Servants often pause here, inhaling deeply before returning to the furnace within. Tools of the garden mirror their purpose. Simple, sturdy and worn. Wooden rakes, iron spades, hoes with chipped edges lean against walls. Baskets woven from willow creek under the weight of harvest. Hands grow calloused from endless labour, nails blackened by soil, backs bent by repetition. The garden demands patience, but it rewards it too in every sprout and every basket of beans. Nobles rarely enter the garden, yet its produce decorates their tables with as much pride as the roast meats. A platter of fresh peas glistening in butter signals wealth. A salad of herbs with oil and vinegar astonishes guests unused to raw greens. What peasants see as ordinary vegetables become in the hall refined luxuries. The kitchen knows this irony all too well. In the village, gardens are even more crucial. Peasant families depend almost entirely on their plots, supplementing bread with whatever grows. Famine comes quickly when gardens fail. Cabbage rots in the rain, beans shrivel in drought, and suddenly hunger stalks the lanes. Each seed sown is a gamble with weather and fate, but no one dares skip the bet. To live without a garden is to walk straight towards starvation. Festivals celebrate the garden's gifts as much as the hunts. Harvest feasts pile tables with apples, turnips, leeks, and nuts, roasted or stewed into hearty dishes. Even the poorest rejoice when baskets overflow, for a full garden means a safe winter ahead. The kitchen receives these offerings with both relief and urgency, knowing abundance must be stored quickly before it spoils. By evening, the garden quiets. Shadows stretch across rows, leaves glisten in the last light, and the smell of soil rises damp and rich. Servants gather the last baskets, tie herbs in bundles, and close gates against prowling animals. Inside the kitchen, the day's harvest is chopped, stewed or stored, its journey from soil to pot already begun. The rhythm repeats tomorrow, and the day after without end. As you leave the garden, you realize it is not merely a patch of earth but the silent partner of the hearth. One produces heat, the other produce. One consumes wood, the other gives life. Together they keep the castle alive, weaving survival from smoke, soil, sweat and season. In the secrets of the medieval kitchen, the garden speaks as loudly as the fire, though in gentler, greener tones. The smell reaches you before the sight does, an aroma sharp and foreign, carried from lands you've never seen. Inside the pantry, small jars and sacks are guarded more carefully than gold. They hold spices, the most coveted treasures of the medieval kitchen. To a modern eye, pepper and cinnamon look ordinary, but in this world, they are tokens of wealth. Proof that the Lord's household is connected to the veins of trade, stretching across continents. Each grain, each thread, has travelled thousands of miles and passed through countless hands before landing here in this smoky room. Pepper reigns supreme. Black peppercorns sit in tiny bags, sealed tightly to keep out dampness, ground into sauces, sprinkled over roasts, or stirred into pottages. It transforms dishes from plain to luxurious. To nobles, pepper is not just flavour but a statement. They can afford what common folk only dream of. Whole fortunes are calculated in pepper, debts and rents are even paid with it. It is the backbone of the spice trade, and kitchens guard it fiercely. Cinnamon follows, its curled bark sticks brought from distant Ceylon. Ground fine, it perfumes sweet dishes and mulled wines, but it also surprises in savoury sauces, blended with vinegar and meat juices, to make flavours richer. A noble guest expects to taste it, if only as proof that the host spares no expense. To the unaccustomed tongue, the blend of meat and cinnamon feels strange, almost confusing, but in a world where extravagance is performance, taste is often secondary to display. Cloves, small and potent, perfume the air with a sharp intensity. A single clove can dominate a dish, piercing through stews or sauces with warmth and bitterness. Cooks use them sparingly, tucking them into apples or onions before roasting. Their rarity makes them precious, measured out like jewels. When a platter arrives at the hall carrying their scent, diners know they are tasting something far beyond the reach of most households. Saffron, glowing golden, sits in its own container like a captive sun. Threads of crocus stigma, gathered one by patient hands. It costs more than its weight in silver. A few strands colour broths and sauces, turning them a brilliant yellow that screams luxury. Some cooks use it boldly, others sparingly, but all understand its power. Even when the taste is subtle, the colour dazzles guests. A lord who serves saffron dishes declares to the world that he has the means to purchase the impossible. Ginger arrives dried, pale and knobbly, grated into powder or steeped in liquid. It lends warmth that cuts through heavy meats. Unlike cloves or saffron, it finds its way into more common kitchens. though always sparingly. In noble households, ginger sauces accompany venison or fish, sometimes mixed with mustard or honey. Its bite is pleasant, but its value lies again in the statement, "This household knows the roots of trade, and they run directly to the table." Nutmeg and mace appear occasionally, though even rarer. Nutmeg's earthy sweetness enriches pies and puddings, while mace, its lacy outer covering, provides a subtler warmth. Together they speak of faraway islands, whose names most medieval cooks never learn. Only the merchants who risk storm and pirate know those shores, but their cargoes ripple all the way into the kitchen, shaping meals and reputations alike. Mustard seed, though local, carries its own importance. Ground fresh in mortars, mixed with vinegar or wine, it produces a sauce sharp enough to cut through any greasy roast. Unlike cinnamon or saffron, mustard belongs to every class, a bridge between noble table and peasant meal. It is proof that not all spice must travel oceans. Sometimes the fields nearby provide flavors just as potent. Still, even mustard becomes part of showmanship, served in fine ceramic jars to impress guests. The use of these spices is not random, but calculated. A cook does not scatter them carelessly. Each pinch is measured, each jar locked, each grain tracked by steward or mistress. To waste spice is unthinkable. To steal it a crime, nearly as severe as theft of coin. Servants whisper of punishments meted out for those caught pilfering a handful of pepper. In a household where bread is abundant but saffron rare, priorities bend strangely toward what dazzles the eye and nose. Trade routes stretch wide to bring these treasures. Caravans carry them across deserts. Ships sail dangerous seas. Merchants haggle in distant ports. By the time a clove reaches this kitchen, it has been sold and resold, each hand taking profit, each journey adding to its cost. No one here sees the lands where spices grow, but their presence ties the household to a network that spans the known world. Spice is not only for flavor, it is for medicine too. Cinnamon soothes stomachs. Cloves numb toothaches. Ginger warms chills. Saffron brightens moods. Apothecaries and cooks blur their roles, each drawing from the same small jars. A noble suffering from gout or fever may request a dish laced with specific spice, believing it will heal as much as it delights. In a time when medicine and food intertwine, the spice cupboard is both pantry and pharmacy. The hall above expects spice in abundance. Guests measure hospitality by taste, by whether the sauces are rich, the wine mulled, the pies perfumed. To fail to serve spice is to appear poor, backward, or miserly. Nobles ruin reputations by skimping on seasoning. Cooks therefore stretch their stores cleverly, combining small amounts with local herbs to amplify flavors, tricking diners into thinking they taste more than they truly do. Illusion, as much as substance, keeps households shining. Peasants, by contrast, rarely taste imported spice. Their seasoning comes from gardens, onions, garlic, mustard, parsley. A pinch of pepper might appear at a wedding, a scattering of ginger at Christmas, but nothing more. To them, stories of saffron and cloves sound like fables, riches belonging to a world far removed from their own, yet they know of it, because noble households flaunt their spice openly, and tales spread like smoke from feast to field. Spice also stirs suspicion. Some churchmen grumble that it encourages gluttony, that the lure of exotic flavors tempts the soul towards sin. Others defend it as God's bounty, meant to remind humans of creation's vastness. The debate simmers, but the feasts continue, and cooks sprinkle pepper without pause. Morality rarely survives contact with a platter of spiced venison. The air in the pantry is heavy with these scents. Sweet, sharp, bitter, warming. It is a perfume that clings to clothing, making the keeper of the spice cupboard a figure of both envy and suspicion. Keys jangle at her belt, jars rattle in her hands, and every servant knows she carries responsibility worth more than her life. When she opens a jar of saffron or pepper, all eyes follow, as though she reveals not food but treasure. At the table, spices reshape expectations. A dish without them is humble, plain. The dish with them, even if built from ordinary meat or fish, rises to elegance. Guests comment, nod, murmur approval. Nobles puff with pride, pleased not only with the taste, but with the implication They command the world's goods, gathered here in a single source. In truth, the cook deserves the praise, but reputation flows upward, never downward. When the meal ends and the jars are locked again, the pantry falls silent. Spices sit in the dark, their power contained until the next feast. They are tiny things, barely handfuls, yet they shape the identity of households and the memory of meals. More than fire, more than bread, they transform a kitchen from mere necessity into spectacle. Walking back toward the hearth, you understand their role in the secret life of the medieval kitchen. Spices are not just flavor, they are power, wealth, illusion, and survival. Each grain of pepper, each thread of saffron tells of caravans and oceans, of risk and profit, of hunger and display. They whisper that kitchens are not isolated rooms, but crossroads of the world, where distant lands meet in bubbling pots, and in their fragrance, sharp and intoxicating, you realize the medieval kitchen breathes not only smoke and sweat, but the air of empires. At dawn, the dairymaid begins her work, rising even before the kitchen fire has caught. She carries wooden pails to the byre, where cows shift restlessly, steaming in the cold air. The smell of straw, dung, and warm animal breath surrounds her, heavy but familiar. She ties her skirts close, settles on a low stool, and begins the steady rhythm of milking. Each squeeze produces a warm stream, foaming in the bucket, a sound as constant in her life as the toll of the church bell. Without her labour, the kitchen would lack butter, cream, and cheese, the comforts that soften the rough edges of medieval meals. The milk, fresh and steaming, cannot linger long. It sours quickly, especially in summer, so it is carried immediately into the kitchen. Some is heated for the Lord's breakfast, poured into porridge or stirred into custards. Most, however, is set aside for transformation, because preservation is the only way to stretch its usefulness. The dairymaid's skill lies not only in milking, but in ensuring the milk lives on in forms that can last days, weeks, or even months. Cheese-making begins with curdling. Warm milk is poured into large tubs thickened with rennet, an enzyme from a calf's stomach, or with sour whey from previous batches. Slowly, the milk separates into curds and whey. The curds are cut, pressed, and salted, packed into molds lined with cloth. Heavy stones weigh them down, forcing out liquid, shaping the mass into wheels. These wheels are stacked in storerooms, aging quietly, developing flavors from sharp tang to mellow creaminess. Each wheel represents both food and wealth, portable and lasting. Butter is another transformation, and it requires both strength and patience. Cream is collected from milk that has rested, skimmed carefully with wide spoons. It is poured into a tall wooden churn, and the maid begins the endless motion of plunging the dasher up and down. Hours pass. Arms ache, but slowly the cream thickens and clumps, separating from buttermilk. At last, golden butter gathers at the surface, washed with cold water, salted, and shaped into blocks. The buttermilk is not wasted. It becomes a drink for servants or a base for baking. Nothing is ever lost in the kitchen cycle. Cheese and butter are staples of the medieval diet, though their quality depends on status. Nobles receive the finest soft cheeses flavored with herbs, pale butter served fresh. Servants and peasants make do with harder, saltier versions, aged until nearly unyielding. Yet then the roughest cheese is precious, offering protein when meat is scarce, filling stomachs when bread alone is too thin a meal. Children grow on it, monks rely on it, and households measure security by how many wheels rest in their cellars. Season shapes the work. In spring and summer, when cows graze lush meadows, milk flows in abundance, rich and creamy. Butter and cheese are plentiful, filling storerooms and kitchens alike. In winter, however, yields drop. Cows produce little, sometimes nothing, and the household leans on stored cheeses to carry them through. The rhythm of the dairy is as much part of the year as planting and harvest, binding food to the turn of seasons. Goats and sheep add their share too. Goat's milk is prized for its digestibility, sheep's milk for its richness. In some regions, sheep's cheese dominates, strong and pungent, filling halls with its aroma. Each animal adds variety, but also labor, different milking, different handling, different curing. The dairymaid knows them all, her knowledge carried not in books but in practiced hands and keen nose. Milk also carries risk. Without refrigeration, it sours quickly, sometimes turning foul before it can be used. Unboiled, it harbours sickness, though few understand why. Some lords distrust it altogether, preferring wine or ale, but the kitchen cannot ignore it. It is too essential, too versatile, to abandon. Instead, they adapt, curdle it into cheese, churn it into butter, boil it into custards and sauces. Fresh milk may be fleeting, but its transformations endure. Flavoured cheeses appear at noble feasts. Wheels studded with sage, thyme or garlic impress guests, showing off both dairy skill and garden bounty. Butter moulded into shapes, birds, flowers, even coats of arms decorates tables, eaten quickly before heat melts artistry into puddles. These touches elevate humble products into spectacle, just as spices elevate meat and fish. The dairy, though often hidden, becomes part of the household's display of wealth. Children in villages often carry their share of dairy labour. Small hands are set to skimming cream, turning churns, or carrying pails from buyers. They laugh at the froth on their noses, but the work is real, tiring, and necessary. Their play is laced with labour, and they learn early that every drop of milk counts. To spill a bucket is a small disaster, scolded sharply, remembered long after. Monasteries, too, become centres of dairy craft. Monks bound by fasting rules rely heavily on cheese for sustenance. Their dairies produce wheels both for their own tables and for trade, filling storerooms with the smell of aging curd. Recipes are recorded in manuscripts. Refined over generations, the cheeses of some abbeys become famous, sought by nobles, traded across regions. Even in cloisters the dairymaids' work echoes, carried on by brothers in habits. Butter, though rich, is sometimes restricted by fasting laws. On certain days, its use is forbidden, and substitutes oil, almond milk, take its place. Yet nobles often secure dispensations, paying the church for the right to keep butter flowing. Wealth bends rules, as always, and the kitchen adjusts accordingly. Still, on strict fasts, servants mutter about bland meals, longing for the richness of buttered bread once the holy days pass. Storage is as vital as production. Cheese wheels are turned regularly, brushed to prevent mold from devouring them too soon. Butter is kept cool in cellars, sometimes packed in brine, or wrapped in damp cloths. In hot summers, even this may fail, and rancid butter becomes common, sharp in taste but still eaten. Households endure because waste is never an option, even when flavours turn sour. Markets echo with the trade of dairy goods. Farmers bring wheels of cheese, pats of butter, even jugs of fresh milk. Though the latter must be sold quickly, townsfolk crowd stalls, testing, sniffing, bargaining. Cheese becomes currency, exchanged for grain or tools, its value recognized everywhere. In regions with fertile pastures, dairy trade supports entire economies, linking village fields to city markets and castle kitchens alike. For peasants, dairy is often the rare treat, not the constant supply. A hunk of cheese brightens a meal of bread. A smear of butter turns plain porridge into comfort. Milk itself, fresh and sweet, is more often drunk by children than adults, who leave it behind as their bodies harden to rougher foods. Yet its presence, however small, carries hope, a sign that cows still yield, that survival continues. The smell of the dairy clings differently from the hearth. Instead of smoke and fat, it is tangy, creamy, sour sweet. It follows the dairymaid into church, into market, into bed. Her hands never lose it. No matter how often she scrubs, it becomes her badge of labour, recognised and respected, even if not always envied. Without her, the kitchen falters. With her, meals are enriched, bellies filled, tables brightened. By evening, the churn is silent, the cheese moulds stacked, the buckets rinsed. The dairymaid rests weary arms, knowing tomorrow the rhythm begins again. The cows will need milking, the cream will need churning, the curds will need pressing. It is endless, repetitive, but without it, life in the castle would be poorer, meals duller, and survival less certain. As you step back from the cool storeroom where cheeses rest in neat rows and butter glows pale in jars, You realize the dairy is not simply a side chamber to the kitchen, it is its quiet twin, feeding the same tables, shaping the same lives, binding the same seasons. The hearth may roar and the bakehouse may bustle, but the dairy hums softly, steadily, turning milk into sustenance, labor into nourishment, and fleeting moments into food that lasts. In the medieval kitchen, no drink is more common than ale. Water, though abundant, is often distrusted, contaminated by waste, animals, and runoff from fields. To drink it is to gamble with sickness. But ale, brewed from grain, boiled and fermented, is safe, nourishing, and filling. It is liquid bread, sustaining servants as much as meals. From dawn to dusk, mugs of ale circulate through the kitchen, keeping thirst at bay and bellies full. Ale comes in many strengths. The strongest is reserved for the lord and honoured guests, thick and hearty, sometimes flavoured with herbs or honey. For servants and children, small ale is brewed, weak in alcohol but safer than water. It is consumed at breakfast, lunch and supper, poured freely, expected as a staple. Brewing is constant. Without steady batches, the household falters. In many kitchens, a separate alewife oversees this process, her work as vital as the cook. The brewing process begins with malted barley. Grain is soaked, sprouted, then dried, filling storerooms with its earthy smell. Crushed and steeped in hot water, it creates a mash, thick and sweet. This liquid, called wort, is drained, boiled and flavoured, sometimes with bitter herbs like groot, sometimes with imported hops in later centuries. The boiling kills impurities while the fermentation that follows transforms it into something safe, sustaining and far more palatable than raw water. Kitchens smell of brewing on certain days. Sweet, yeasty, almost fruity. Steam billows as cauldrons bubble, filling the air with a sticky warmth that clings to skin and hair. The brewer stirs with long paddles, sweat dripping as she keeps the mash moving, wary of scorching. Once cooled, the wort is poured into barrels, yeast sprinkled in, and lid sealed tight. Days later, it is ready, frothy and alive, a drink that nourishes as much as it refreshes. Wine, by contrast, is rare outside noble circles. Imported from France, Spain, or Italy, it is expensive, shipped in barrels across seas and rivers. In castles, it graces feasts, poured into goblets of silver or pewter, spiced with cinnamon, ginger, or cloves. Mulled wine warms winter nights, its aroma filling halls above, though seldom drifting into servants' quarters. For them, wine is a distant luxury, glimpsed only in discarded dregs or tales told by travelling merchants. Local vineyards exist in warmer regions, especially southern Europe, where monasteries tend vines and produce their own vintages. These wines range from rough to refined, but all carry the weight of status. A lord who serves fine wine declares his reach and wealth, reminding guests that his connections stretch far beyond his fields. In England or the north, where grapes struggle, wine is even more precious, halving only through trade and thus reserved for the highest tables. Mead sometimes appears, a drink of honey and water fermented into sweetness. It is older than both ale and wine, tied to festivals, rituals, and myth. Honey is costly, so mead is not everyday fare, but when it is served, it marks occasion. Its golden glow in cups, its smooth warmth in the throat, make it beloved at celebrations. Nobles favour it for its refinement, peasants dream of it for its rarity. Cider, too, plays a role in certain regions, especially where apple orchards thrive. Pressed juice ferments quickly, producing a tart, refreshing drink that bridges the gap between ale and wine. It lacks the prestige of imported vintages, but serves well at common tables. Farmers celebrate cider in harvest festivals, drinking deeply as they dance around bonfires, while in castles, it may appear quietly, hidden behind the grandeur of wine. Even water, though distrusted, still has its place. Drawn from wells or rivers, it is used in cooking, washing, brewing. Sometimes on the cleanest days it is drunk plain, though more often flavoured with herbs, boiled for safety, or mixed with wine to stretch supplies. Children might drink it when nothing else is available, but adults are wary, remembering too many deaths from unseen sickness. Water is essential, but never celebrated. In monasteries, the story shifts again. Monks brew ale on a scale vast enough to supply both themselves and their surrounding villagers. Their brewing skills become renowned, their recipes recorded, refined, and passed down. Some abbeys earn reputations for strong, flavorful ales, sought after far beyond their cloisters. Even today, echoes of those traditions linger in monastic breweries, a reminder that beer once tied faith and sustenance together. The kitchen barrels are treasures in their own right. Rows of them line cellars, stacked carefully, tapped with wooden spigots when needed. They must be guarded against leakage, spoilage, and theft. A barrel gone sour is a costly loss, a sourness that spreads through meals and moods alike. Servants tasked with tending barrels knock on them daily, listening for fullness, sniffing for signs of spoilage, treating them like living creatures that demand attention. Drinking customs shape daily life. Servants quench thirst with mugs of small ale at every meal, often more liquid than solid food. Children sip it as casually as water, growing up with its taste ingrained. Nobles, meanwhile, sip wine at feasts, raising goblets in toasts, their cheeks flushed with drink and firelight. Mead flows at weddings, cider at harvests, ale always, everywhere, sustaining every class, binding daily rhythms with its steady presence. Yet drink carries risks too. Excess is common, drunkenness a familiar sight in both halls and cottages. Ale may be weak, but consumed endlessly, it still dulls the senses. Wine, stronger, topples nobles into boasts and quarrels. Monks preach moderation, but kitchens laugh, knowing moderation rarely lasts beyond the third cup. Tales abound of lords collapsing into roasts, of servants sleeping under tables, of villagers staggering home from festivals. Drink is both sustenance and temptation. Drinks mingle with food in countless ways. Ale is used in stews, lending depth and richness. Wine becomes the base for sauces, reduced with spices until it coats meats in brilliance. Mead sweetens desserts, cider marinates pork. Each drink does double duty, filling cups and flavoring dishes, blurring the line between nourishment and indulgence. To cook without them would be to strip the kitchen of half its power. The social divide shows in every cup. A noble's wine is imported, rare, displayed proudly. A servant's ale is cloudy, thin, carried in wooden mugs. Peasants drink theirs from rough bowls, savouring even the weakest brew. Yet all share the same ritual. Lift, sip, swallow, sigh. Drink binds them together, across rank. Though the quality divides them sharply. The liquid may be common, but its meaning differs at every table. Festivals heighten this divide. Nobles boast of wine cellars, uncorking bottles for visiting dignitaries. Villagers brew extra batches of ale, carrying them in jugs to fields where music and laughter swell. Mead flows at weddings, cider at harvests, each marking joy as much as survival. For a night, abundance erases the edge of scarcity, and cups raised high silence hunger. Even illness bends to drink. Weak ale is prescribed for the sick, safe when water is not. Mulled wine warms fevers, honeyed mead soothes throats. Monks use ale in remedies, blending it with herbs. No one questions its place in healing. It is too ingrained, too essential. In kitchens, cups are handed as easily as plates, drink woven into every cure and comfort. By evening the barrels grow lighter, mugs emptied, lips stained. Servants stagger to pallets. Nobles recline in halls. Monks chant prayers with bellies warmed. Tomorrow, brewing begins again, barrels refilled, cellars stocked. The cycle never ends, because thirst never ends, and drink is life itself. As you step from the cellar, the smell of yeast and malt clinging to your clothes, you realize that the medieval kitchen does not feed with food alone. It quenches thirst, fortifies bodies, softens moods, and binds communities. Ale, wine, mead, cider, even water. Each carries stories of survival, wealth, faith, and folly. To understand the medieval kitchen is to understand that every meal required not just fire and bread, but also the steady pouring of liquid into waiting cups. Preservation is the shadow partner of every meal, the silent insurance policy behind the spectacle of roasts and feasts. A medieval kitchen cannot rely on abundance alone. Seasons shift, harvests fail, rivers freeze. To survive lean months, food must be coaxed into lasting beyond its natural life. Smoke, salt, vinegar, and cellars become as crucial as knives or fire. Without them, hunger would march unchecked through castle and cottage alike. Salting is the first defense, and it is brutal. Meat is cut into manageable slabs, rubbed thoroughly with coarse salt, and layered in barrels. More salt pours over each layer, drawing moisture out, stiffening flesh until it hardens into boards. The salt burns raw hands, cracks skin, and lingers sharp in the air, but the process saves lives. A salted ham may last months, a barrel of salted fish an entire season. Rehydrating them later requires soaking in water or wine, scraping, sometimes even boiling, but without salt there is no winter food. Smoking runs close behind. In a corner of the kitchen or a separate smokehouse, fires are kept smouldering with damp wood or herbs. Meat and fish hang from rafters, slowly darkening as smoke seeps into every pore. The smell is thick, clinging, a mixture of wood and flesh that lingers on clothes and walls. Hours stretch into days as the smoke works its way in, sealing the food against decay. Smoked hams, sausages, and fish dangle in storerooms, safe from the creeping hand of rot, at least for a while. Pickling offers another path. Vegetables and fish are submerged in brine or vinegar, sealed in jars or barrels. The sharp sting of vinegar fills storerooms, making eyes water as barrels are opened. Cabbages become sauerkraut. Cucumbers grow sharp and sour. Fish grows slippery, but edible. Months later, pickling transforms not only flavor, but texture, turning soft foods crisp, bland foods pungent. To modern tastes it may seem harsh, but in winter it is a miracle of variety. Drying plays its role too. Beans, peas, and lentils are spread on boards under sun, their moisture gone by autumn. Fruits, apples, plums, pears are sliced and laid to shrivel, becoming wrinkled but sweet, packed into sacks for later stews. Even herbs are dried, tied in bundles and hung in rafters, their fragrance fading but not lost. Dried foods clatter rather than squish when stored, a reassuring sound that promises survival. Storage is a science of its own. Cellars keep food cool, their stone walls damp and steady in temperature. Barrels line the walls, grains sealed tight against vermin, salted meat stacked, pickled fish stowed. Sacks of beans rest on wooden platforms to keep them from the wet floor. Apples are wrapped and laid carefully to avoid bruises that would spread rot. Every corner has its purpose, every container a small fortress against spoilage. Even butter and cheese must be preserved. Butter is salted heavily, sometimes buried in crocks of brine, lasting weeks instead of days. Cheese wheels are brushed and turned, preventing mold from consuming them too quickly. Some cheeses are made deliberately hard, designed to last through winter travel. They may break teeth before they break down, but they carry sustenance further than softer kinds ever could. Wine and ale, though consumed daily, also serve as preservers. Food soaked in wine keeps longer, both flavoured and shielded from decay. Ale, poured into broths or potages, disguises the age of meat. Vinegar itself is a byproduct of failed wine, but nothing is wasted. What spoils in one form redeems in another. Preservation is not perfection. It is adaptation, and kitchens learn to bend every mistake into usefulness. The dangers of preservation are many. Salt too scarce, and the meat rots anyway. Smoke too thin, and insects burrow into flesh. Pickle jars poorly sealed, and mold creeps across the top. Families live and die by such details. A spoiled barrel may mean hunger for months, even starvation if winter runs long. Servants are blamed, punished, dismissed, but the truth is that nature herself often wins. Kitchens fight decay with every trick they know, yet the battle is never certain. Pests challenge the stores relentlessly. Rats gnaw through sacks of grain, leaving droppings that spread sickness. Mice nibble apples, beetles infest flour, weevils hide in beans. Cats patrol constantly, Dogs guard doors, but the war never ends. Servants beat barrels with sticks to drive pests away, hang food from rafters, or smear floors with ashes to reveal tiny footprints. Every crumb saved is victory, every sack lost is defeat. In noble households, preservation is not just necessity but art. Meats are layered with spices before salting, their flavors masked with pepper or cinnamon, so that months later they still impress guests. Fruits are candied with honey or sugar, when sugar is available, transformed into luxuries that gleam on platters. Even preservation becomes display, proving that a lord can turn survival into spectacle. Peasant preservation, by contrast, is stark and unadorned. Salted fish hard as leather, dried beans stored in sacks, roots buried in earth cellars. No spices, no sugar, just labor and patience. Yet these humble stores feed families when fields lie barren, their plainness a quiet triumph against hunger. Peasants measure success, not in showy feasts, but in whether their children wake with bread and beans through February's cold. Seasons dictate rhythm. Autumn is frantic, a rush to salt meat from slaughtered animals, to smoke fish from rivers, to dry fruits before frost. Cellars fill, racks groan, hands blister from work. Winter is quieter, a slow drawing down of supplies, careful rationing. Spring brings relief, gardens sprouting again, though stores must last until then. Summer's abundance refills hope, but always with an eye toward the next cycle of preservation. Preservation changes taste, and medieval people grow used to it. Salted beef is chewy, smoked eel strong, pickled cabbage sour. These flavors become familiar, comfort, even, part of the rhythm of life. Fresh meat, or vegetables when they appear, are relished not just for nutrition but for novelty. To bite into something unsalted, unpickled, unaltered, is to taste summer itself, fleeting and precious. Religion shapes preservation as well. Fasting days require fish, so barrels of salted herring fill storerooms. Lent demands discipline, and kitchens prepare accordingly, ensuring pickled and dried foods suffice. This day is by contrast. See preserved goods unveiled in abundance, piles of smoked sausages, wheels of cheese, jars of candied fruit. Preservation, tied to faith, structures not only survival but celebration. Stories spread of preserved foods carried on journeys, soldiers marching with salted beef, pilgrims with dried fruit, merchants with hard cheese. These stores feed armies and trade routes, their durability as valuable as gold. Preservation fuels expansion, exploration, even conquest. Without it, travel shrinks, armies falter, connections break. A salted fish is more than supper, it is infrastructure. The smell of storerooms tells the tale. Salts sharpen the nose, smoke thick in the air, vinegar stinging eyes, dried herbs faint but persistent. It is a mingling of survival scents, not pleasant but reassuring. Servants breathe it daily, knowing each barrel and jar is another day of life, banked against hunger. Their labor, hidden from feasting eyes, makes survival possible. By the time you step from the cellar, you understand the quiet heroism of preservation. It is not glamorous, not celebrated, but it holds the household together. Salt-stiffened hams, smoke-darkened sausages, vinegar-sharp vegetables, dried fruits. They whisper of labor and patience, of fear and foresight. In the medieval kitchen, the feast above depends on the silence below. Where food is bent against time itself, the air shifts the moment word spreads that a feast is coming. Servants stiffen, voices rise, and the kitchen transforms from steady labor into frantic storm. Every corner of the room vibrates with urgency, every pot and pan pulled into service. Preparations for a lord's banquet are no simple matter of cooking. It is theatre, politics, and survival, each dish carrying the weight of reputation. To fail is to invite disgrace, not just for the cook, but for the entire household. The planning begins, days in advance. Stewards consult accounts, tallying stores of meat, grain and spice. Messengers are dispatched to markets and farms, demanding contributions, purchasing luxuries, securing rare fish or birds. Huntsmen range into forests to bring back deer, boar, or swan. Fishermen net rivers for pike and eel. The garden is combed for herbs, the cellars opened for wine. Even peasants are called to provide hens, eggs, or labour. The feast does not simply appear, it is pulled together by the hands of dozens, bound by obligation and command. In the kitchen, animals arrive whole, sometimes still bleeding. Carcasses of deer hang from hooks. Rabbits dangle by their feet. Geese honk in baskets until their throats are slit. Butchery fills the room with the smell of blood and raw flesh. Knives working swiftly to divide bodies into cuts. Servants scrape hides, pluck feathers, gut fish, all while dodging the head cook's barking orders. Nothing about the process is hidden. This is meat in its most primal form, transformed from living creature to feast in a matter of hours. Meanwhile, dough is kneaded in troughs as big as bathtubs. Bakers sweat over loaves and trenchers, the latter destined to serve as edible plates. Pastry is rolled thick to line enormous pies, strong enough to hold meat, fruit, or fish encased within. Some pies are simple, but others are extravagant, designed to astonish. Birds baked inside may fly out when cut, or hidden fillings may surprise with colours and scents. These tricks are as important as flavour, for banquets are as much display as nourishment. Cauldrons bubble with stews and broths, each seasoned heavily with herbs and spices. The rich smell of cinnamon, pepper, and cloves rises into the smoky air. Servants stir endlessly, terrified of burning, because one spoiled pot could undo hours of labour. Cooks taste with quick slurps, adjusting salt or vinegar, judging by instinct rather than measure. The rhythm is relentless. Chop, stir, baste, taste, repeat. Roasting dominates another corner. Whole pigs turn on spits, their skin blistering into golden crispness. Fat drips into pans, collected for sauces. Birds are basted with honey and wine until their feathers, restored after cooking, shine on platters as if alive. Servants rush to and fro, brushing meat, keeping flames steady, turning spits with aching arms. The heat is unbearable, but no one dares slacken pace. Each roast is a jewel for the Lord's table, a symbol of his wealth and reach. Fish receives its own elaborate treatment. Pike is poached in spiced wine, eels stewed with almonds, salmon baked with herbs. Sometimes entire fish are reassembled after cooking, stitched back into their skins to appear whole. Such tricks delight noble diners, who gasp at the sight before devouring it. The kitchen laughs quietly, knowing the illusion is as important as the taste. The clatter of knives, the roar of fire, the hiss of dripping fat. Together they form the feast's overture, but the true frenzy is in the coordination. Servants race with platters, jostling for space at the hearth or the table. Children dart with messages, runners dash to storerooms, boys stagger under barrels of ale. The head cook orchestrates like a general in battle, her cleaver tapping on boards to demand silence or attention. Every mistake is punished swiftly, because mistakes here can shame a household. Sweet dishes emerge last, crafted with as much care as any roast. Custards flavoured with almond milk, jellies moulded in intricate shapes, fritters dusted with sugar, if the household can afford it. Sweets are rare and treasured, their presence at table the final flourish of wealth. Even the poorest servants pause to admire them before they vanish upward into the hall. The great hall itself expects a spectacle, and the kitchen must provide. Dishes are arranged not only for taste, but for show. Roasts carried on silver platters, pies decorated with coats of arms, sauces bright with saffron, wines mulled and steaming. Trumpets may sound as the first course ascends, a parade of servants straining under trays. Guests cheer, nobles preen, and the kitchen exhales in relief, if only for a moment. Yet even as dishes climb to the hall, the kitchen continues to labour. More courses follow, each requiring fresh preparation. The rhythm does not slow until the final platters are gone. Servants collapse onto benches, gnawing leftover scraps with greasy fingers. For them, the feast is labour, not celebration. They taste the meal only in bones and crusts, never in the glittering dishes above. Accidents still haunt the frenzy. A roast dropped into the fire, a pie cracked before serving, a sauce oversalted. Each sparks curses and panic. Servants scramble to recover, to patch flaws, to disguise errors before they reach noble eyes. Sometimes they succeed, sometimes not. Reputation is fragile in these moments, and cooks know their place depends on flawless performance. Stories circulate of famous feasts gone wrong. A swan undercooked, its flesh red before horrified guests. A pie filled with live birds that suffocated before presentation. A roast spoiled with rancid fat. Each tale serves as warning and joke, whispered among kitchens across the land. Better to laugh than to dwell on the terror of failure, because tomorrow another feast will demand perfection. For peasants, hearing of such extravagance is bitter. Their meals consist of bread, beans, and porridge, rarely touched by spice or meat. A feast in the hall above is a world away, its smells drifting faintly into village streets. Yet even they may feel its ripples, as leftovers trickle down, as alms are distributed, or as gossip spreads of sights and tastes they may never know firsthand. The kitchen serves two worlds at once, nobles who demand spectacle and peasants who live on scraps. Feast preparation also binds community. Farmers supply grain, hunters supply game, brewers supply ale, gardeners supply herbs. Each plays a role. Each gains or loses favour based on contribution. A feast is not just one night of indulgence. It is the culmination of relationships, debts, and obligations woven together. The kitchen stands at the centre of that web, transforming raw tribute into polished glory. When the final course is served and the hall above resounds with laughter, the kitchen sinks into exhaustion. Servants wipe sweat with flour-stained sleeves, scrape congealed fat from pans, and bank fires low. The air is thick with smoke and grease, heavy with the ghosts of dishes already eaten. For a few hours, silence reigns. But by morning the cycle begins anew, because kitchens never truly rest. As you step back from the chaos, you see the deeper truth. A feast is not just food, it is power displayed in edible form. Every roast, every spiced sauce, every moulded custard whispers of wealth, control, and prestige. The kitchen, frantic and smoky, makes that illusion possible. Behind every shining platter in the hall lies the sweat of dozens, the risk of failure, the triumph of survival. That is the true secret of feast preparation in a medieval kitchen. The shine of the feast fades quickly when you step back into the working kitchen. Here, the glamour vanishes, replaced by the harsher truths of daily labour. Hygiene is not a matter of neatness, but a battle against filth, disease, and pests that constantly press against the walls. For every dish that dazzles in the hall above, there are rats scurrying underfoot, grease caked on stones, and burns blistering the skin of exhausted servants. A medieval kitchen is as much hazard as hearth. The smoke alone is enough to shorten lives. The hearth pours it endlessly into the air, thick and acrid, stinging eyes, until they water, lungs ache, throats rasp, coughing becomes as natural as breathing. Servants grow used to it, but their bodies pay the price. Soot stains walls, rafters, even the cobwebs overhead. On some days, the kitchen feels less like a place of cooking and more like a slow suffocation chamber, where survival depends on sheer endurance. Vermin are constant companions. Rats dart boldly across the floor, gnawing at sacks of grain, leaving trails of droppings that carry disease. Mice creep along rafters, dropping into flour barrels if lids are not fastened tight. Cats prowl to keep them in check, tolerated though half feral, their eyes glowing in firelight. Even so, the battle never ends. One careless night, and half a store of bread may be spoiled. For all its grandeur, a castle's kitchen fights the same enemies as a peasant's hut. Flies add to the torment, especially in summer. Drawn to blood, grease, and offal, they buzz in clouds around butchering tables, landing brazenly on food. Servants wave them off with rags, but they return instantly, an unending swarm. Dishes are covered with cloths, though nothing keeps insects at bay for long. To modern eyes, it would seem revolting, but to medieval kitchens, it is simply fact of life. Spills cover the floor, grease, water, blood. The beaten earth or flagstones quickly grow slick. Servants slip, crash, sometimes carrying hot pans that scald skin. Burns are among the most common injuries, from boiling water, sizzling fat, or flames leaping from the hearth. Few households keep physicians at hand. Servants bandage themselves with rags, smear wounds with herbs, and return to work. The scars of the kitchen mark arms and faces like badges of survival. Knives and cleavers add their dangers. A slip while butchering a deer, a distracted cut through onions, and blood mixes with food in an instant. Fingers are lost, tendons severed. Stories circulate of servants crippled by kitchen accidents, doomed to beg outside the gates because they can no longer work. Every blade gleams not just with grease but with risk. The head cook scolds constantly, "Focus, watch your hands, don't be stupid." But fatigue makes mistakes inevitable. Food itself carries hazards. Spoiled meat, disguised with heavy spices, can sicken entire halls. Milk gone sour too soon upsets stomachs. Bread infected with ergot fungus brings hallucinations and convulsions. The kitchen does its best to judge freshness, but without modern science, guesses are imperfect. Nobles grumble when ill, but it is servants who risk punishment if food makes anyone sick. In truth, illness is as much nature's doing as negligence, but blame is always convenient when it rolls downhill. Washing dishes is no light task either. Without soap or running water, servants scour pots with sand, ash, or handfuls of straw. Grease clings stubbornly, burns onto surfaces, blackening pans until they gleam only in patches. Buckets of filthy water are hauled outside and dumped, splashing shoes and attracting pigs. The cycle repeats endlessly, arms aching, fingernails cracked, clothes stiff with grime. Cleanliness is relative here. It means clean enough not to stink too much. Not spotless brilliance. Personal hygiene fares little better. Servants sweat constantly, clothes unwashed, hair greasy with smoke. Baths are rare, reserved for special occasions or when filth becomes unbearable. Even nobles bathe infrequently, perfuming themselves instead to mask odor. The kitchen magnifies smells until they cling to skin like another garment. Smoke, fat, blood, onions. To step outside is to carry the kitchen with you, an invisible fog that announces your labor to everyone you pass. Waste disposal is crude. Buckets of slops are carried outside and thrown into pits or onto middens, where pigs root through scraps. Dogs snatch bones, rats swarm, and the stench rises heavy in the summer sun. Rain turns the ground to muck, soaking shoes, splattering hems. No one speaks of sanitation. It is survival, rough and imperfect. What matters is clearing space for the next flood of pillings, bones, and filth that tomorrow will bring. Fire itself is a predator in the room. Sparks leap from the hearth, catching on straw mats, drying herbs, or aprons. Flames roar suddenly if fat spills, spreading in terrifying seconds. Servants beat them down with cloths, praying they succeed before the entire kitchen catches. Everyone knows tales of kitchens burned to ruins, of castles lost because a single spark escaped. The hearth gives life, but it demands constant vigilance, ready to destroy in a moment's carelessness. Illness thrives in this environment. Soot in lungs, vermin spreading disease, spoiled food poisoning bellies. Coughs, fevers, stomach cramps ripple through staff. Few can afford to stop working. Rest is luxury. Servants drag themselves to tasks, weaker, each day, until death takes them quietly in corners. The kitchen continues regardless. Meals demanded even in mourning. Life here is harsh, and no one pretends otherwise. Despite dangers, laughter persists. Jokes echo over chopping blocks, pranks are played with garlic or pepper, songs rise above coughing fits. Humor is not luxury but weapon, cutting through misery with shared smiles. A servant splashed with slops curses, then laughs when another slips the next moment. These small rebellions keep spirits from breaking, reminding all that survival is not only labor but also resilience. Hierarchy adds its own form of hazard. Scullions, lowest of all, shoulder the filthiest jobs, gutting fish, scrubbing pans, hauling water. They bear the brunt of punishment when things go wrong, often whipped or dismissed. Cooks stand higher, their scars respected as proof of skill. Stewards and butlers rise higher still, seldom touching dirt, commanding with words instead of knives. This chain of rank ensures blame always falls downward. Even when mistakes begin above, Punishments for negligence are swift. A servant caught stealing scraps might lose an ear. One who lets a fire die may face lashes. To modern eyes it seems brutal, but in households where survival depends on discipline, mercy is rare. Fear mixes with sweat and smoke, ensuring every hand moves quickly, every task done, whether willingly or not. For nobles, none of this is visible. They see platters gleaming, tables laden, servants smiling politely as they present dishes. They do not see the rats, the burns, the coughs, the sores. The kitchen is a hidden world, a theatre behind the curtain. Its mess and misery are erased in the glow of the feast, concealed beneath spice and ceremony. Only those within know the truth. The sounds of hazard are constant: coughing, cursing, knives clanging, fires crackling, buckets sloshing. Accidents interrupt with sudden screams, quickly silenced, then folded back into the rhythm. The kitchen never pauses, even when blood is spilled, bandages are tied, sleeves rolled down, work resumed. Silence is never allowed to last long enough to remind anyone how fragile their bodies truly are. Yet for all its dangers, the kitchen endures. Generations work here, scars pass down like heirlooms. Mothers teach daughters to stir carefully, fathers warn sons about knives and burns. Each lesson written in pain, each memory folded into tradition. The hazards are normalized, the risks accepted, because without the kitchen, there is no survival, no feast, no household at all. As you look around, the truth settles in. A medieval kitchen is both giver of life and harbinger of suffering. Smoke blinds, fire burns, vermin swarm, disease spreads, yet still the room feeds entire castles, entire villages. It is paradox made stone and soot, a place that nurtures and harms, comforts and kills. Its hazards are not flaws but features, woven into daily survival. To live by the kitchen is to live with danger, and to accept that every meal carries a price unseen at the Lord's table. Every kitchen breathes with hierarchy, invisible, yet strict, binding servants in chains of duty as tight as iron. The roles within are many, each defined by task and rank, and to step outside one's station is to invite punishment. The organization is as complex as any battlefield, for feeding a household demands order as rigid as command. At the top stands the head cook, a figure both feared and respected. She commands the room like a general, her cleaver as much a weapon of authority as of butchery. Keys jangle at her belt, granting her access to pantries, spice cupboards and storerooms. Her eyes miss nothing. The boy turning a spit too slowly, the girl spilling flour, the pot left unstirred. She controls the flow of ingredients and the rhythm of labor, ensuring chaos does not drown the kitchen. Nobles know her value. Without her, feasts fail, reputations crumble. Yet for all her power, she still bends to the steward, the official link between kitchen and lord. The steward or seneschal operates above, rarely touching knife or ladle. He tallies supplies, oversees purchases, decides allocations. His concern is not taste but balance. How much grain remains? How many barrels of ale must be brewed? How many sheep slaughtered for winter? He is both accountant and overseer, ensuring resources last. His presence in the kitchen is rare, but his shadow lingers over every sack of flour and salted ham. To servants he is distant authority, faceless, except in reprimands. Beneath the cook, a tier of assistants labors tirelessly. Roasting masters mind the spits, sauce makers stir cauldrons, bakers knead dough. Each has their specialty, their corner of expertise. Honed through years of apprenticeship, they carry more respect than scullions, for their skills are harder to replace. The sauce ruined is more costly than a bucket of slop spilled, and so they walk the line between exhaustion and prestige. Scullions, lowest of all, live in filth. They scrub pots blackened with soot, fetch water from wells, haul firewood until their backs ache. They clean floors slick with grease, chase rats from grain stores, carry chamber pots when ordered. Children often fill these roles, their small bodies darting where adults cannot. Their clothes stink, their hands crack, their eyes droop with exhaustion. Yet they are the blood of the kitchen, invisible but vital. Without them, the higher ranks cannot function. Between scullions and cooks, exist layers of apprentices. Young boys or girls hoping to rise in rank shadow their masters, learning recipes, techniques, and secrets. They chop endlessly, grind spices, stir pottages, until arms burn. They endure scoldings, cuffs, and endless repetition, but with time they may advance. To become a true cook is to escape the dirtiest work, to hold some pride in one's labour, and to perhaps one day command others. Few make it, but the hope lingers like the smell of bread in the air. The Spit Boys deserve their own mention. Their task is simple: turn the spits hour after hour, never stopping. Yet simplicity does not equal ease. Their arms tire, their eyes sting, sweat drips endlessly. But the roast cannot falter. They are mocked by others, pitied by some, but without them the Lord's prized venison would be ruined. Some households use dogs in wheels instead, but even then, a boy must watch, correct, and endure. Their role is drudgery, but indispensable drudgery. Women fill many posts, especially in baking, dairy, and herb preparation. They churn butter, knead bread, tend gardens, and flavour sauces. Some rise to prominence as mistresses of the pantry, holding keys and overseeing stores. Others remain nameless, bending over tables for lifetimes without recognition. Their hands shape meals, their knowledge sustains households, but chroniclers seldom write their names. Still, within the kitchen walls, their authority is undeniable. Hierarchy extends beyond labour to meals themselves. The best food goes to nobles, the next to higher servants, the scraps to scullions. Even at table, rank is reinforced. A carver serves the Lord with ceremony, slicing meat with practiced elegance, while servants gnaw bones behind the scenes. The very act of eating mirrors the chain of command, a daily reminder that kitchens do not just feed, they enforce order. The butler and pantler manage drink and bread respectively, overseeing separate domains yet tied to the kitchen's work. The butler ensures wine and ale flow smoothly, calculating measures to satisfy without waste. The pantler guards loaves, trenchers, and flour. His role is critical as the baker's. These officers are servants yet elevated, carrying responsibility that grants them dignity. Their mistakes, though, punished heavily. Stale bread or sour wine can ruin a feast as surely as burnt meat. Discipline binds the hierarchy together. Servants late to their posts are whipped. Those who steal face dismissal or mutilation. Obedience is drilled into every rank, because the smooth running of the kitchen cannot survive rebellion. Even laughter, though tolerated in moments, must quiet instantly at the cook's command. To disobey is to risk not only job but survival, for dismissal often means poverty beyond the castle gates. The rhythm of hierarchy is visible in posture. Cooks stride upright, knives flashing, voices sharp. Scullions hunch low, eyes downcast, bodies darting quickly between tasks. Apprentices hover nervously, watching masters, waiting for approval. Even animals reflect this order. Cats roam freely, dogs labour in wheels, pigs root in scraps. Everyone, human or beast, has a role. The kitchen is a kingdom within the castle, with ranks as rigid as any noble court. For nobles, this hierarchy remains unseen. They see only the polished results, never the chain of labour that produces them. Yet the order below is what allows order above. The Lord commands feasts, the steward calculates, the cook executes, the servants sweat. Without the invisible structure, the visible spectacle collapses. Authority trickles downward, labour upward, and the system holds steady as long as fear and hunger enforce it. Children entering service quickly learn their place. A boy of 8 may begin fetching water, scrubbing pots, cleaning floors. By 12 he might assist a cook, learning to chop herbs or stir sauces. By 16, if lucky, he rises further. Many never escape scullionhood, their lives spent bent over muck. Others rise slowly, their ambition driving them to endure, hoping one day to wear the cook's keys at their own belt. The hierarchy is cruel, but it dangles hope just enough to keep wheels turning. Humour flows through the ranks, despite the rigidity. Scullions whisper jokes about stewards, apprentices tease spit boys, cooks mutter curses under their breath. Laughter is brief but vital, a crack in the wall of obedience. Everyone knows their station. but everyone also knows that misery shared is misery halved. Even in chains of duty, bonds form, jokes echo, and humanity persists. Feasts strain the hierarchy to breaking, scullions collapse, cooks scream, stewards demand impossible quotas. Yet somehow, the order holds. Each rank fulfills its part, like cogs in a vast machine. Servants may resent their place, but they depend on it too, for without order the kitchen would descend into chaos, and chaos means hunger. Better a harsh system that feeds than no system at all. By night, when the fires are banked and the scraps cleared, the hierarchy softens, servants share scraps together, regardless of rank, laughing in shadows. The cook leans weary on her cleaver, the scullion slumps against a barrel, the spit boy stretches aching arms. For a moment rank blurs into simple survival. Tomorrow it will harden again, but tonight it fades in the shared relief of work completed. As you watch this hierarchy in motion, you realize the medieval kitchen is a mirror of the larger world. Nobles above, peasants below, labor divided and bound by necessity. Authority rules with keys and punishments. Survival trickles down through scraps and laughter. To step inside the kitchen is to see the castle in miniature, structured, relentless, unforgiving, and yet within it, meals are created, lives sustained, and order preserved. Step into the rhythm of daily meals, and the differences between noble and commoner strike harder than the scent of smoke. The kitchen bends itself to serve two worlds at once. The gilded hall above, where nobles dine on spectacle, and the servants' quarters below, where scraps and stews form humble survival. Food becomes the clearest marker of class, visible in every bowl, every platter, every crumb. For nobles, meals arrive in courses, each designed to impress. The day might begin with bread of the finest white flour, served alongside butter, honey, or spiced wine. Dinner, taken at midday, is the grandest, featuring roasts, pies, sauces rich with pepper and cinnamon, and sweet dishes coloured with saffron. Supper in the evening may be lighter, but still luxurious. The spread of cold meats, cheeses, and sweetmeats, variety, abundance, and spectacle are the noble standard. For meals are not just nourishment but proof of wealth. Commoners, by contrast, no repetition and simplicity. Their bread is coarse, dark, and dense, often rye or barley. Pottage, the endless stew of grains, beans, cabbage, and scraps, dominates both midday and evening. Occasionally a scrap of bacon or a bone adds richness, but meat is rare. Cheese and ale are staples. Vegetables come from small gardens, and sweet treats are rarer still. Their food fills bellies but seldom dazzles the senses. Hunger is never far, and survival is measured in bowls of gruel. In noble kitchens, sauces become the hallmark of refinement. Pepper sauce for venison, almond milk thickened with breadcrumbs for fish, ginger and clove blends for poultry. Each plate must arrive seasoned, fragrant, colourful. Spices, rare and costly, flow freely in noble dishes, their presence alone announcing status. To taste cinnamon in a sauce is to know you are among the privileged few. For peasants, seasoning rarely moves beyond onions, garlic and mustard seed. These flavours are sharp, strong, and local, but they cannot mask the monotony of pottage day after day. On feast days, peasants may taste pepper or ginger if the lord shares leftovers, but most live entire lives without touching saffron or cinnamon. Their meals echo the soil itself, earthy and repetitive. Meat marks the deepest divide. Nobles expect venison, boar, swan, peacock, animals hunted for prestige, as much as for taste. Their kitchens roast whole beasts, baste them in honey, glaze them with spice. Carvers slice portions with ceremony at table, each cut reinforcing hierarchy. Peasants, meanwhile, eat meat only occasionally, a chicken slaughtered for a festival, a pig shared at Christmas, or scraps gleaned from lordly generosity. For most, meat is the dream, not the reality of daily meals. Fish bridges the classes differently. Nobles enjoy pike, salmon, sturgeon, dressed in sauces and spices. Peasants subsist on herring, eels, or whatever the river yields, often salted or dried. The church's fasting rules level the field slightly. forcing everyone to eat fish, but even then the gap shows. The noble's table glitters with pike in saffron sauce, the peasants with herring boiled plain. Both fulfill the rule, yet one sparkles while the other trudges. Bread, too, speaks of rank. White bread, made from fine wheat, appears on noble tables, light and soft. Brown or black bread, mixed with barley, rye, oats or peas, fills peasant bowls, dense and coarse. Nobles disdain such loaves, yet for commoners they are lifeblood. In times of famine, acorns or beans are ground into bread, bitter but edible. Bread is universal, but its form divides classes as surely as walls of stone. Drinks reveal the same split. Nobles sip wine, mulled with spices, poured into silver goblets. Mead or imported vintages appear at banquets. Peasants drink ale, weaker and cloudy, larded into wooden mugs or rough bowls. Water, unsafe and distrusted, is last resort for both. The choice of drink is not simply preference, it is identity, separating halls from hovels in every swallow. The presentation of food highlights difference further. In the great hall, servants carry platters, trumpet sound, dishes are unveiled with ceremony. Guests marvel at gilded pies, roasted swans, coloured sauces. Eating here is performance, designed to impress allies and rivals alike. In the village, meals are eaten from shared bowls, wooden spoons dipped in turn, silence broken only by chewing and the occasional muttered joke. There is no spectacle, only necessity. Yet scraps trickle downward. After feasts, trenchers soaked with gravy are tossed to dogs or beggars. Bones stripped of meat still hold nourishment for servants. Peasants gather near castle gates on feast days, hoping for scraps, for a crust of fine bread or a bite of roasted bird. These leftovers bridge worlds, feeding the poor even as they remind them of their distance from wealth. Feasts exaggerate the gulf, but daily meals reinforce it quietly. A nobleman expects meat twice a day, a peasant perhaps twice a month. A noblewoman savours spiced custards, a peasant mother chews stale crusts. Both eat to live, but one dines for power, the other for survival. The kitchen supplies both, balancing extravagance above with subsistence below, its fires burning for masters and servants alike. Religion complicates the divide. Fasting rules apply to all, forcing nobles and peasants alike to abstain from meat on appointed days. Yet nobles soften the burden with rich fish dishes and almond milk custards, while peasants boil salted herring or onions. The same rule produces different meals, revealing inequality even in devotion. Faith binds, but status untangles the knots. Children grow up tasting their place in society. Noble children sample sweetmeats, fruits, and sugared nuts. They learn to prefer delicacy over abundance, to scorn coarse bread as beneath them. Peasant children chew crusts, drink small ale, eat cabbage stews until they are full. If lucky, their palates form not from choice, but from necessity, shaped by the limits of class. The smells of meals tell the same story. In the hall, saffron and cinnamon perfume the air. In the cottage, boiled cabbage and smoke dominate. Visitors know instantly where they stand, their noses confirming rank as surely as their eyes. Food is not just sustenance, it is a language of power, spoken in aromas, flavors, and textures. Still, hunger levels all. In famine years, even nobles feel the pinch, though never as sharply. Their feasts shrink, their spices dwindle, their meat grows less frequent. Peasants, meanwhile, face true starvation, mixing bark, weeds, and anything edible into their potages. In such times, the illusion of class wavers slightly, but it never fully collapses. Even in scarcity, nobles eat better scraps than peasants' feasts. By evening, as the kitchen winds down, the contrast remains stark. A noble retires from a table heavy with meat and wine, satisfied. A peasant finishes a bowl of thin pottage, still hungry. Both depend on the same fires, the same servants, the same earth, but their meals remain worlds apart. The kitchen binds them together and divides them all at once, its labour sustaining both privilege and poverty. As you step away from the hearth tonight, you see the truth written in crumbs. Food is not equal, Nor is it neutral. It mirrors the lines of class, faith and power that run through medieval life. Every loaf, every cup, every platter declares where someone belongs. The kitchen does not just feed bodies, it reinforces the order of the world, one meal at a time. The seasons write themselves into the kitchen with an authority no steward or cook can overrule. Spring, summer, autumn, winter, each brings its own ingredients, its own pace, its own anxieties. To cook in a medieval household is to dance constantly with the calendar, adjusting every recipe and ration to what the fields, gardens, rivers, and markets can provide. The rhythm of time is as present in every cauldron as the fire beneath it. Spring begins with hunger. Cellars are thin, salted meat nearly gone, last year's apples shriveled, grain barrels low, pottage is stretched thinner each week, more water than substance, more hope than nourishment. Families chew old rye bread hard as stone, softened in ale or broth, yet the garden begins to whisper of renewal. Nettles and sorrel sprout, sharp and green, boiled into soups that revive bodies weary of salted flesh. Eggs return as hens begin to lay again, and their golden yolks brighten stews after the lean months. Spring is both hardship and promise, a season of scraping by while watching shoots push through the soil. Summer bursts into abundance. Gardens overflow peas, beans, cabbages, lettuces, onions. Orchards swell with early fruits, and fish are plentiful in rivers. Cows give rich milk, butter and cheese flow easily. In the kitchen, cauldrons brim with fresh greens, pies bake with berries, sauces sparkle with herbs, fires burn long and hot, though servants sweat more in the heat. Preservation begins here too, drying beans, salting fish, preparing for the months when plenty will vanish again. Summer is joy, but always shadowed by preparation, for abundance cannot be trusted to last. Autumn is the great harvest. Fields of grain are gathered, threshed and milled into flour. Orchards grown with apples and pears, stored in straw-lined cellars. Pigs are slaughtered, their meat salted, their fat rendered into lard, their intestines stuffed with sausage. The kitchen works day and night, salting, smoking, drying, filling storerooms before frost strikes. It is frantic, exhausting, but also triumphant. For a brief moment, barns and cellars feel infinite. The scent of security as rich as roasted pork. Autumn is the season of work, but also the season of hope. Winter tightens its grip, harshly. Fires roar constantly, but the air stays icy. Fresh greens vanish, gardens sleep, rivers freeze. Meals lean on salted meats, dried beans, stored apples, hard cheese. Pottage thickens with whatever roots remain in cellars. Turnips, onions, cabbages, shriveled, but edible. Ale grows sour, butter rancid, but still it is eaten. Hunger prowls more closely now, especially for peasants whose stores were never abundant to begin with. Nobles fare better, yet even their tables lose luster, relying more on salt and spice than freshness. Winter is endurance, a trial to be survived, a countdown to spring's fragile shoots. Famine is the shadow that can fall in any season. Too much rain, too little sun, war tearing fields apart, all bring disaster. Grain prices soar, peasants starve, and even castle kitchens tighten belts. Bread is stretched with beans, acorns or straw. Dogs and cats vanish quietly into cooking pots in villages. Tales are told of famine years when bark was ground into flour, when parents fed children broth made of weeds. In those times, the difference between noble and peasant narrows, though never disappears. Hunger is the great equalizer, but never the great leveler. Festivals punctuate the seasons like sparks in darkness. At Christmas, meats are slaughtered, and tables groan with roasts and pies. At Easter, eggs painted and boiled symbolize renewal, shared in joy. Harvest festivals celebrate abundance, peasants dancing with cider, nobles feasting with venison. The kitchen works hardest in these moments. But the reward is laughter in the hall, bellies full, spirits lifted. Festivals are reminders that food is not only survival, but celebration, that even in hardship, people crave joy at table. The changing seasons also dictate flavor. Spring tastes sharp and green sorrel, nettles, onions. Summer tastes fresh and sweet, berries, peas, herbs. Autumn tastes hearty, roasts, apples, ale. Winter tastes heavy and preserved, salted beef, pickled cabbage, dried beans. To live in a medieval household is to taste time itself, each bite a reminder of where the year stands, of how far until hunger or abundance returns. Markets echo these rhythms. Summer stalls burst with greens, fruits, and fish. Autumn stalls overflow with grain and salted meats. Winter markets are sparse, filled with dried goods, salted barrels, and weary faces. Housewives and stewards haggle, their eyes on prices that rise and fall with seasons. To walk a market is to glimpse not only food but fate. Whether the year will bring plenty or famine, joy or despair, children feel the seasons most. In spring they nibble nettle soup and thin bread, stomachs still tight with hunger. In summer they gorge on berries until their mouths stain purple. In autumn they crunch apples, stealing more than they're given. In winter they gnaw crusts, their eyes wide at the rare sight of meat. The rhythm of their childhood is written in flavours, shaping their memories more deeply than any tale told at hearthside. Monasteries live by the seasons too. Their gardens feed them with herbs, their ponds with fish, their fields with grain. They record harvests, weather, and yields, their manuscripts echoing the rhythm of kitchen and field. They chant prayers for rain, for sun, for survival, their faith woven into the soil itself. To them, food is sacrament, the passing of seasons a divine lesson as much as a material fact. Travellers know the seasons as risk. A summer journey brings berries and fresh bread. A winter one, hard cheese and salted beef. Pilgrims carry dried fruit. Soldiers march with salted pork. Merchants buy what markets allow. Every journey begins with calculation. What season is it? What food will last? What hunger may await? The kitchen shapes not only homes but roads, binding the pace of life to the turning of the year. Nobles may bend seasons with trade, importing fruits or wines, storing spices to mask preservation. Yet even they cannot wholly escape the cycle. A banquet in February still tastes of salt, no matter how much cinnamon dusts the sauce. Wealth softens the seasons but never erases them. Time is the one master all kitchens must serve. The sounds of the seasons echo in the kitchen. Spring brings the chopping of greens, summer the clatter of berry baskets, autumn the hammer of knives on pig bones, winter the slow scrape of ladles through heavy stews. The music changes, but the song is constant, played year after year until it becomes the heartbeat of survival. The smells shift too. Spring's nettles sharp and grassy, summer's fruit sweet and heady, autumn's pork rich and smoky, winter's cabbage sour and thick. The nose knows the season before the calendar speaks. Even blindfolded, a servant could tell the time of year by the air drifting from the hearth. By evening the cycle feels eternal. Fires burn, pots bubble, stews thicken, bread bakes. Whether in spring scarcity, summer abundance, autumn harvest, or winter endurance, the work is endless, but so is the reward, the miracle of another meal on another day. The seasons may command, but the kitchen obeys with steady labour. As you stand back, the truth unfolds. The medieval kitchen is not only a room of fire and food, but a reflection of time itself. Every dish tells the story of its season. Every storehouse whispers of preparation. Every hunger groan echoes the rhythm of the year. Survival here is never separate from the calendar. It is written in it, day by day, meal by meal. And now, as the seasons fade and the last embers of the kitchen fire glow low, the pace softens. The roar of spits and cauldrons quiets to a hush. You hear only the gentle crackle of ash, the faint drip of water cooling from pots, the whisper of wind pressing against shutters. The kitchen, once thunderous with knives and voices, settles into a drowsy calm. Imagine the servants asleep, curled on straw pallets, their hands still smelling faintly of flour, garlic smoke. The cats doze on rafters, bellies warm, tails twitching in dreams of chasing rats. In the larder, wheels of cheese sit silently, barrels breathe slow with ale, herbs dangle like forgotten prayers. The whole kitchen seems to exhale, as though relieved to rest until dawn's demands. Your own breath slows to match. The images of roasting spits, bubbling stews, sharp spices, and bustling servants blur gently into one another. They soften, no longer harsh or hurried, but part of a timeless rhythm. Fire, garden, season, feast, famine, all woven into a story that feels both ancient and familiar, as steady as the turning of the air. Let the weight of centuries rest easy now. The dangers of smoke and knives recede. The laughter of servants lingers faintly. Above all, there is the comfort of food, the promise that even in hardship, meals were made, bellies filled, lives sustained. The medieval kitchen whispers this reassurance through its smoke and silence. Close your eyes. The embers fade to darkness. The scents drift to memory. The sounds hush to stillness. The secrets of the medieval kitchen slip quietly into dreams, carrying you with them. Good night, sweet dreams.